Relax, Mr. Barrett. It's common knowledge that the Milan family never meddles in political affairs, Siegfried said casually, spreading his hands. As I mentioned, I'm just here for a chat. Hearing this, Roy's tense expression eased slightly. He raised his lifeless eyes and asked, with a hint of trepidation. Lord Milan, what do you wish to discuss? As you can see, I'm nothing but a defeated general. Despite his words, Roy remained acutely aware of his surroundings. He had heard numerous rumors about the Milan family and was terrified of inadvertently divulging information. Nothing major. Why don't you start with a self-introduction? Tell me what kind of person you think you are. Roy was taken aback. He looked at the smiling black-haired man across from him, completely unable to fathom what the other was thinking. But under pressure, he answered earnestly. My name is Roy Barrett, the current head of the Barrett family, a Viscount of the Kingdom, and an honorable royal knight. I pledge my allegiance to Prince Roderick, and my loyalty is as unbreakable as my shield. These were the words he had spoken to the young Roderick when he was knighted in the past. However, Roy heard a sneer. Loyalty? Siegfried's expression was a mix of amusement and mockery, his brow furrowed in derision. Roy's eyes immediately turned red. He even forgot his fear and shouted angrily. A man can be killed but not insulted. Lord Milan, even you cannot doubt my loyalty. He took the bait. Now, let's see if your effect is as terrifying as I imagined. Siegfried took a deep breath. The following developments would determine how he would face this ability called deceptive speech in the future. You just claimed to be very loyal? Is there a problem with that? Siegfried chuckled softly as he stood up and began to pace around Roy's chair. No, not really. I just find it somewhat nauseating to use those words on people like you. What did you say? Roy never expected this Milan would insult him like this. As a knight, he could endure all kinds of severe torture, but such slander was unbearable. Take back your words. Please retract what you just said. You're a Milan. A hero. How dare you tarnish our loyalty like this? Isn't it true? As a knight of the kingdom, you don't serve the country, the people, or even the princess, the first heir to the throne. Instead, you assist Roderick in staging a coup, causing widespread chaos and suffering. You call this loyalty? No. As a son, your dying father instructed you to serve the future king, but you disregarded his wishes and acted hypocritically. Is this loyalty? As an elder, you chase and hunt a 16-year-old girl relentlessly. What kind of loyalty is this? No. No. Shut up. Shut your mouth. As an inner court official, you knew that the second prince and the princess were siblings by blood, yet you didn't persuade him to stop. Instead, you added fuel to the fire and joined this fratricidal conflict. Is this your loyalty? It's not like that. The voice of defense grew weaker, and tears welled up in Roy's eyes. He knew all these truths, but what could a mere great knight do? Roy, you're just a pig, burying your head in the feed your master provides, blindfolding yourself with excuses of loyalty. Have you ever used your brain to think in your 30-plus years? This world is still mad enough to call oneself a loyal subject just by wearing knight's armor. Roy, this isn't loyalty, it's stupidity. Silence echoed in the dilapidated wooden house, so quiet it was suffocating. Suddenly, a choked sob broke the silence, slowly turning into weeping, and soon into loud wailing. I know all this. But what can I do? I'm just a great knight, just a small viscount. I can't even enter the royal palace. What can I do? What can I do? What do you want me to do? Roy was in tears, slamming his head against the back of the chair in self-destruction. After a few strikes, the back of his head was covered in blood. The moment had come. Siegfried's eyes turned cold as he slowly walked behind Roy, bending down like a devil whispering in Roy's ear. It's simple. For the sake of the people, offer everything to the true ruler of this country, Kriemhild. Additional effect of deceptive speech. After the 9th truth, the credibility of the next lie increases by 100%. Like a bomb thrown into boiling water, Roy's already turbulent thoughts completely exploded. Yes. You're right, I am a knight. I am a knight of the kingdom. I must be loyal. I must offer my loyalty. Surrender. I surrender. Your Highness. Your Highness. Princess Kriemhild, I offer you my everything, Your Highness. Please accept me. Your Highness. Your Highness. Roy toppled over along with the chair, desperately crawling towards the door like a bloodthirsty monster. The pain and confusion on his face had completely disappeared, replaced by a fanatical fervor as if possessed. Siegfried walked out of the house without a word, stepping over Roy on the ground. Deceptive speech, the horror of this ability was just as he had predicted. Siegfried realized the malignant nature of this ability on the first day he obtained it. He had always been avoiding opening this Pandora's box, and today was just a small experiment, a test run. The fact proved that it indeed had the function of brainwashing others. Lies, in essence, are things that alter others' perceptions and distort their will. Some scoundrels use lies to make women believe they are worth entrusting their lives to, some swindlers use lies to make customers believe their products are worth buying, and some cults use lies to manipulate the thoughts of their followers, making them sacrifice everything for so-called faith. Even worse, the former leader of the Third Reich once wove a huge lie, bewitching his people to march onto the battlefield, brewing the most terrible war in human history. Siegfried realized the malignant nature of this ability on the first day he obtained it. If good and evil were to be distinguished by purpose, Siegfried could be considered a good person for now. But if distinguished by means, he was undoubtedly thoroughly evil. He had always been self-aware, his blood had turned cold when he was 16. Bone-chilling coldness filled the young man's eyes as he silently uttered words devoid of warmth in the warm morning sun. But this world has never distinguished good and evil by purpose or means. The only criterion for judging right and wrong is success or failure. Whether it's brainwashing or killing, as long as you win in the end, it's all justified. Yang Jing returned, bringing an auction invitation and... can you introduce this fellow? Siegfried asked, pointing to the man at Yang Jing's feet. A man who looked like a wealthy merchant lay there, covered in wounds, especially his lower body, which was a bloody mess. He was barely breathing, clearly on the verge of death. Yang Jing spoke expressionlessly. I went to ask him for an invitation. He said he wanted me to spend the night with him. Then he ended up like this. Yang Jing concisely summarized what could have been a 4,000-word adventure story, making Siegfried's eye twitch. Ah. I see. Siegfried glanced at the merchant's lower body, instantly feeling his own manhood shudder. Better not provoke this woman in the future. He bent down and patted the merchant's face. Hey, brother. Answer one question before you die. The merchant opened his eyes groggily, mumbling with his last breath, legs, white, pain. Seems that was the murder weapon. Brother, where's your treasury? You, who are you? I'm your cousin, remember? You said you'd leave your fortune to me, don't you remember? Cousin, oh yes. The merchant's eyes regained some life, clearly a final burst of energy, before death. He grabbed Siegfried's hand, his expression full of regret. Brother. Yes, big brother. Beware of women. With that, the merchant kicked the bucket. Siegfried was dumbfounded. He grabbed the merchant's collar and lifted him off the ground. Hey! Where's the money? Where's the money? Damn it, where's the money? Quick, call a priest. Make him spit out the money before he dies. Siegfried was heartbroken, feeling like he hadn't received all the rewards in a game. In the evening, the company's executive meeting was held as scheduled at the dinner table. Yang Jing, the intelligence director and one of the shareholders, spoke first. This is an invitation to an auction. Her speech was abrupt. She stood up, said just this one sentence, and sat down again, knowing someone would explain for her. Everyone instinctively looked at the major shareholder, waiting for him to speak. Siegfried picked up the invitation and waved it in the air. This is an underground auction, understand? Kriemhild, I don't understand. The participants of this auction are wealthy merchants and nobles with vast fortunes, understand? Roland, I don't understand. Catalina, the deputy captain of security, suddenly jumped up with a look of sudden realization. I know. You want to sell the teacher's sword. Roland's Durandal was currently the most valuable item in the company. If sold, it could buy an entire earldom. Roland slapped his silly disciple on the head, scolding, is this something that can be sold? Catalina sat back down, covering her head pitifully. Siegfried couldn't be bothered with these two, and continued, the goods at these auctions are all things that can't be brought to light. From the list that came with the invitation, there are even slaves. The air in the dining room suddenly froze. 20 years ago, a woman named Vivian was crowned queen in the royal capital. At 23, she consolidated most of the power within 5 years, completely sidelining the incompetent old king, and then carried out sweeping reforms in the kingdom, with the primary focus on completely banning the slave trade. The reforms, of course, met with fierce resistance from the vested interests, but were bloodily suppressed by the Rose Knights, who reported directly to the queen. This queen forcefully gave the declining Mon a new lease of life with her iron-fisted methods, but also wore herself out and passed away early. By now, everyone must have guessed that this woman, later known as the Rose Queen, was the mother of Roderick and Kriemhild, and the former regent of the Kingdom of Mon. This year marked the 5th anniversary of the queen's passing, and the slave trade, which was once suppressed the hardest, had made a comeback. Kriemhild's usually gentle face was tinged with anger, while Roland slammed his fist on the table, nearly knocking all the dishes to the floor. These bastards, we didn't kill enough of them back then. He was one of the last members of the Rose Knights, and the shield carved with a bright red rose still hung in his room. Kriemhild was burning with anger. The ban on the slave trade was one of her mother's proudest achievements. To this day, she still remembered the scene of her mother, without any elegance, hands on hips, boasting to her when she was only 4 or 5 years old. "Little Hild, Mommy did a great job this time, maybe she can save thousands of people. Don't suck your thumb. Quick, give Mommy a round of applause." She was a gentle, strict, yet humorous mother, like sunshine, and the last backbone that God gave to this decaying nation. It's only been 5 years, Mother has only been gone for 5 years. Kriemhild's fists were clenched white. She stared at Siegfried, trying her best to summon the surrounding light spirits to read this man's intentions, but to no avail. She could only open her mouth to probe. "Mr. Siegfried, you must have a reason for bringing this up." Siegfried waved his hand, gesturing for everyone to calm down, then spoke unhurriedly, "We will attend this auction and purchase slaves." Bang! Roland slammed his fist on the table again, roaring in anger, "Are you joking? Do you know what you're saying?" Catalina hurriedly tried to pull Roland back. "Teacher, Lord Milan must have his reasons for saying this." "What reasons could there be for this?" Kriemhild remained silent, but from her gloomy expression, it was clear she was not happy. Everyone, please don't fight." The cute half-elf boy Darren tried to mediate with tears in his eyes, but his voice was too small and easily drowned out by the agitated Roland. Siegfried coldly observed this scene, his gaze sweeping over each person, his expert-level cold reading skills in full force. "Kriemhild and Roland will oppose my opinion. Catalina has already started to trust me unconditionally, which is good. Darren, still neutral? Worth winning over. Why is Bobo so quiet?" This was why he spoke in this fragmented way, to check the internal power dynamics. Some of his methods in the future would certainly be questioned, and to avoid this, preparations had to be made starting now. "Are you done making a fuss?" A cool voice rang out at just the right moment, like a bucket of ice water instantly dousing the boiling dining room. "If you're done, let's continue listening." Yang Jing swept her expressionless gaze over everyone. Now she understood why these people were beaten so badly by Roderick. They were simply a bunch of rabble. Siegfried threw a grateful wink at Yang Jing, receiving a disgusted look in return. He coughed and continued to explain his plan unhurriedly. "Do you understand now?" A strange atmosphere began to permeate the dining room. If this atmosphere had to be given a name, it would probably be called conspiracy. "Lord Milan, you're so devious, but I like it." Catalina praised Siegfried as always. Kriemhild buried her head low, but her shoulders were slightly shaking. She was trying hard not to laugh out loud. "This doesn't seem quite right, it completely goes against the spirit of knighthood," said Roland, the model knight who loved ambushes, with an eager look on his face as he spoke these high-sounding words. A cold smile bloomed on Siegfried's face. Everyone noticed that whenever this man showed this expression, it meant someone was about to be in trouble. "I believe this auction will be very exciting." Located in the southernmost part of the Kingdom of Mon, the Constant Earldom did not belong to Duke Bailan but was directly under the royal family, holding a status equal to the Great Dukes. This remote region had a resounding title, the Granary of Mon. This earldom, covering less than 40 square kilometers, possessed the kingdom's most fertile black soil. The grain production from this area alone accounted for 50% of the kingdom's annual yield. When Siegfried first heard this, He was genuinely shocked that such a small area could feed half of the country's population. What kind of soil was this? How many harvests per year? But then he remembered this was another world, and it made sense. Probably the priests from the Harvest Church were working overtime all year round, constantly using magic to ripen crops. Siegfried's group drove their carriage into Constant City, the capital of Constant Earldom, known as the City of Wheat Fragrance. The underground auction would be held here tonight. A pretty face poked out of the carriage window, curiously observing the scenery outside. Kriemhild was very excited. As a princess, she rarely left the palace, and for the past half-year, she had been on the run. She had never traveled like this purely for pleasure before. "Your Highness, please don't do that. Even with the illusion cloak, we can't guarantee there won't be accidents," Roland, while driving the carriage, worried like a mother hen. "It's fine. You all saw the wanted posters at the city gate. Even without this cloak, it probably wouldn't matter," Kriemhild replied. Indeed, every major city in the kingdom now had wanted posters for the princess and her group, though the portraits were masterpieces of abstract art that would make even Picasso weep. Siegfried swayed back and forth on horseback. "Yes, you heard right. Despite having a carriage, he chose to ride a horse." He was being silly again. He had always wanted to ride a horse but never had the chance, so he wasn't about to miss this opportunity. He had added another saddle to one of the carriage horses. Roland drove the carriage while he rode ahead. Now they had the expressionless Yang Jing and the excited princess in the carriage, Roland the driver at the front, the Chanibius Siegfried on horseback, and the garden person Bobo perched on top of the carriage. They couldn't have been more conspicuous if they tried. Roland strongly opposed this, of course, but Siegfried shut him down with one sentence: "If you were pursuing us, would you expect your targets to enter the city so openly?" The major shareholder had a point, so Roland could only keep quiet. The auction invitation allowed only 3 people to enter. Siegfried, Roland, and Kriemhild would attend. Yang Jing was there to guide them and to investigate the location of yesterday's deceased merchant's treasury. Yes, Siegfried still hadn't given up on that money. As for Bobo, Siegfried had dragged him along, fearing the mole might try to escape while he was away. Bobo was extremely unwilling but had to submit to the major shareholder's authority. Constant City wasn't particularly large, but it was the most prosperous city for miles around. Vendors could be seen everywhere on the streets. Some were merchants from other regions, others were adventurers who had just completed guild quests and were selling their monster hunting spoils. This scene finally gave Siegfried a taste of the sword and magic fantasy world. What had he been doing until now? Either farming or interrogating moles, occasionally risking his life pretending to be tough in front of human-shaped Gundams. Under Yang Jing's guidance, the group passed through the market district and arrived at the residential area, where they would stay at an inn. The city's buildings were indeed different from rural places, like Fengtao village. Here stood elegant 2-story buildings made of stone bricks and red pine, both beautiful and comfortable. Laundry hung from balconies extending from the second floors, and occasionally residents would bow to Siegfried's group as they passed below. These were the city's wealthy inhabitants. Roland hadn't changed into casual clothes. At Siegfried's request, he still wore his knight's armor, bearing the Ferdinand family crest. The residents were bowing to him as a noble knight. This was also why they hadn't been harassed by the greedy city guards at the gate. Siegfried looked around and saw a familiar sight. Several emaciated beggars with vacant expressions wandered through this wealthy district. They had come from the slums outside the city, hoping to beg for food in this affluent area. These people, unsurprisingly, represented the majority of this city of wheat fragrance. He winked at Roland behind him. "Seems even the most fertile land hasn't made them prosperous." Roland didn't answer, his expression grave. He had seen worse scenes during these past 6 months. Both Siegfried and Yang Jing were quite resistant to such scenes, not because they were heartless, but as otherworlders, they found it difficult to treat this world as reality. When Yang Jing first became a wanderer 2 years ago, she would feel distressed at such sights, but after traveling through various worlds, she had developed immunity. As for Siegfried, well, let's just say he was a devoted Paradox Games player. The group soon arrived at the inn Yang Jing had mentioned. A beautifully carved wooden sign hung over the inn's door, with letters written in fancy script. "Stallion Banner, this name can't be copied, right?" Siegfried gave Yang Jing, who had just jumped down from the carriage, a strange look. He suspected she had chosen this inn because of its name's over 90% similarity to something else. Pushing open the door, they were hit by the rich aroma of wheat beer, followed by adventurers shouting, a bard singing, and clinking glasses as lively as a marketplace. The slightly plump innkeeper, upon seeing Siegfried's group, or rather, upon seeing Yang Jing, rushed over enthusiastically. "Little May, are these the companions you mentioned? Oh my, we even have a noble knight. Come in, come in." Yang Jing showed a rare smile and spoke familiarly to the innkeeper. "Auntie, please give us 2 rooms for one night." "Of course. I've kept your room empty, and I'll have the kitchen send up some food and wine." Such enthusiasm, one might think Yang Jing was her daughter. Siegfried leaned close to Yang Jing's ear and whispered, "Did something happen between you before?" "Nothing much. I just rescued her wrongly imprisoned son from jail." She casually mentioned another story that could be expanded into 5,000 words. Siegfried was dumbfounded. "Wow, your otherworld life is really exciting." "I'm nothing compared to you." Yang Jing gave him a disdainful side glance. The noble princess had never been to such a place before. She looked around curiously, sometimes applauding the bard, sometimes moving closer to watch a group of adventurers play Gwent. By the time Roland noticed his princess was missing, Kriemhild had already successfully integrated into a group of adventurers with her natural charm and was about to sit down to play cards with them. Roland rushed over in 3 quick steps and pulled Kriemhild out of the crowd. "Meow. Your Highness, could you please give me less worry? We're not here to play. Look at Mylan, he's very stead dash." Before he could finish saying steady, boisterous male laughter erupted behind them. "Ha ha 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 ha. That's nothing. I've even beaten up a great knight." "Really? I'm not educated, so don't try to fool me." "Why would I lie? Not only did I beat her up, I even grabbed her breasts." "Amazing. Brother, may I ask your honorable name?" "I am Siegfried." Roland's forehead veins bulged, his mouth twisted in anger. Unable to contain himself any longer, he grabbed Kriemhild and headed upstairs. Meanwhile, Siegfried had fully immersed himself in the environment, as if he were right at home. Holding a large wooden mug brimming with beer, he had his arm around the shoulder of the adventurer team's captain. Laughing heartily and cracking bawdy jokes, they looked like the closest of brothers. "Where have you been striking it rich lately, bro?" Siegfried asked. The adventurer captain waved his hand and sighed resignedly. "Don't even ask. Business has been abysmal lately. There weren't many powerful monsters at the border to begin with, and since the kingdom went to war, merchant caravans have become scarce. We can't even find work as guards anymore." Siegfried patted the captain's shoulder with an empathetic look. "Times are tough for everyone. Just the other day, I saw a group of deserters who fled from the capital. After they ran out of food, they started raiding villages." Hearing this, the adventurer captain let out another long sigh and complained. "Tell me about it. Recently, all we've been getting are missions like finding missing people, looking for lost cats, oh, and even searching for the missing princess. Is this really what we adventurers should be doing?" Siegfried's eyebrows twitched, and a shadow immediately fell over his heart. "The capital is still better," the captain continued. "A few years ago, the Rose Queen learned from the neighboring empire and built a sewer system. Since then, adventurers in the capital have never been out of work. There are always monsters in the sewers waiting to be killed. It's practically a gold mine." The adventurer captain, oblivious to Siegfried's unease, continued to daydream and boast. "If only I could encounter an ancient dragon. They say these creatures love to hoard gold and silver treasures. Taking down one of those would set me up for life." A nearby adventurer dressed as a ranger immediately burst into laughter. "Pfft, dream on. With your C-rank skills, you'd struggle even with a nest of goblins, let alone a dragon." "What's wrong with a little dreaming?" the captain retorted. Just as Siegfried was about to find an excuse to slip away, the drunken adventurer captain leaned in close again, apparently having truly accepted Siegfried as a brother. "Brother, judging by your attire, you must be a mage, right? Being a mage is truly great. You can always find work, no matter the times, and the ladies love you." Siegfried was still dressed in his black robe, with his hair hidden under the hood. Usually, only fugitives and mages dress this way. "Ha ha ha, you flatter me, brother. Let me show you a trick or two." With that, Siegfried flipped a gold moan coin. The coin spun rapidly in the air, before Siegfried caught it with a snap. But when he opened his palm, the gold coin had vanished. Whoa. The surrounding adventurers collectively gasped in awe. Hey, let me through, make way. How did you do that? Where did the coin go? A female adventurer wearing somewhat revealing clothes squeezed through the crowd to Siegfried's side. Her eyes were wide with curiosity. She had an attractive figure, especially the curves of her buttocks in those tight shorts, which were hard to forget once seen. Seeing the young lady's enthusiasm, Siegfried changed his target and reached towards her, pulling the gold coin out of her chestnut curls. In an instant, the whole place erupted. Huh? How did it end up there? That's amazing, bro. Brother, what's your elemental affinity? I'm a mage too. Can you teach me? I can pay. Siegfried drained the beer from his large wooden mug in one gulp. As he stood up, he reached out and gave the female adventurer's bottom a squeeze. The woman yelped, covering her behind and darting to the side, her face flushed bright red. Siegfried laughed raucously and staggered upstairs under everyone's gaze. This wasn't just being a scoundrel, it was the epitome of scoundrel behavior. All four of Roland's group were waiting in the room for Siegfried to return. The guy had been drinking downstairs for almost 2 hours, as if he had completely forgotten why they were here. Several times, Roland had wanted to go down and call him up, but every time he saw that smug, arrogant face and heard that unrestrained laughter, he felt his anger rising. He was afraid he might lose control and give this Milan lord a beating, but he also didn't dare send Kriemhild to call him, as that would likely just result in one more drunk person. Yang Jing sat quietly on the bed, flipping through the Wanderer's Manual, reading about how to make a cool entrance using smoke bombs. She knew Siegfried was gathering information and would return when the time was right. Finally, the door opened, and a drunk with a flushed face and reeking of alcohol stumbled in, supporting himself on the doorknob. Just as Roland was about to start cursing, Siegfried slammed the door shut. In that instant, all signs of drunkenness vanished from Siegfried's face, replaced by a serious expression and cold eyes. Roland was left speechless, swallowing all the prepared arguments. We have a problem, Siegfried said concisely. Yang Jing looked up, frowning silently to express her question. Star Plum, did you send out that letter? Yes, I mailed it when we came to the city yesterday, using magical transmission. It was a false battle report addressed to Roderick, written in Yang Jing's handwriting. The content basically stated that the operation was very successful, and Kriemhild had been killed. However, Roderick found out. He submitted a request to the Adventurers Guild yesterday to search for Kriemhild. What? Roland exclaimed in disbelief. Kriemhild clutched the hem of her dress, muttering nervously, my brother. Logically, Yang Jing's report should have been the first-hand information. There was no reason for Roderick to know the outcome before receiving Yang Jing's report. Siegfried took a deep breath and looked at Yang Jing with some amusement. It seems that the second prince doesn't trust you very much either. He trusts no one, Yang Jing replied as calmly as ever, as if all of this was within her expectations. TCH, so difficult to deal with. Siegfried felt uncomfortable. He always felt like he was playing chess against another version of himself. Anyway, the plan to fake death and escape has failed, and Star Plum's cover is blown. The enemy will continue to search for us, so we need to be careful when going out in the future. Roland, don't bring out that big sword of yours unless necessary. And you, your outfit. Siegfried had only spoken half his sentence when he saw Yang Jing's cold gaze directed at him. He involuntarily swallowed and said, never mind, as long as you're happy. At this moment, the wall clock pointed to 5 in the evening. Siegfried took out the invitation from the Wanderer's Manual and said in a deep voice. It's about time. Let's go. 4, Golden Wheat Street. Following the map attached to the invitation, the group of 4 arrived at the front of this huge, elegant mansion after many twists and turns. This street was the wealthiest district in the entire city of Constan. It was lined with mansions like the one before them. The residents here were mostly clerics of the Sun God Church or extremely wealthy merchants. The residence of the city's lord, Count Constan, was also on this street. An underground auction being held openly in such a luxurious and conspicuous mansion clearly indicated who was behind it. At the main gate, a handsome male attendant in a tailcoat approached. Siegfried was stunned when he saw him. This male attendant had 4 ears, 2 behind his eyes like a normal human, and another pair of cat ears on top of his head. He also had a thin, long cat tail behind him. It's a man, damn it. Why couldn't it be a cat-eared girl? Are you here for the auction? May I see your invitation, please? The group had already changed into evening wear, all wearing masks, with Siegfried adding a hood on top. These were the rules of this auction. Because they were selling items that couldn't be shown in public, all participants' identities had to be kept secret. Except for the organizers, no one knew who was sitting next to them. Are you a demi-human? Roland's deep voice came from behind his mask, and it was clear that even before the auction started, his mood was already turning sour. Yes, sir. If you're uncomfortable with my race, I can call a human attendant to serve you. Demi-humans were a race born from the interbreeding of humans and beast men. They had characteristics of both humans and beast men, and not every demi-human looked human-like. Most were neither here nor there, looking both human and beast-like, and were discriminated against and ostracized in both human and beast men societies, in stark contrast to half-elves. Handsome catmen like the one before them, with human features far outweighing beast men features, were extremely rare. Demi-humans were distributed in the western part of the Qilin continent, in the Beast Men Federation. They were all born to human women who had been abducted by beast men. Their presence here meant, "It's all right, we don't mind that. May I ask, are you a slave?" Kriemhild spoke up on Roland's behalf, her voice a bit hesitant. "Yes, madam. I was bought by my master from the Holy Beast Federation." The Holy Beast Federation was what those furries called themselves. Siegfried stepped forward and handed the invitation from his pocket to the catman attendant for verification. "Ah, Mr. Loxier, we've been expecting you. If you don't mind, please allow me to show you the way." "Certainly, thank you. Although I'd prefer a cat-eared beautiful girl." Hearing the words of thanks, the catman was visibly startled. He quickly waved his hands and said, No, this is all part of my duty. It's my honor to serve you." Suddenly, he noticed Bobo, who was hidden behind the three, and his tone became a bit troubled. "I'm sorry, but each invitation only allows 3 people to enter." Siegfried had anticipated this. He had specifically brought this garden people scout for a reason. Siegfried pointed at Bobo, then at the catman attendant, and said with a half-smile, "He is the same as you." The group of 4 was led by the male attendant to a spacious and luxurious banquet hall. The situation of slaves could be seen from this incident. An invitation was only supposed to allow 3 people to enter the auction, but Bobo still came in with them. The reason was simple: his current status was that of a slave, and he didn't count as a person. Bobo was a slave bought by the royal family. Although slavery was abolished after the Rose Queen came to power, years of enslaved life had been ingrained in Bobo's bones. He still instinctively bowed and scraped to everyone, even though soldiers of the same rank as him could order him around. A large part of Siegfried's plan this time would involve him, which was why he insisted on bringing Bobo along. At this moment, quite a few people were already standing in the hall. They were all wearing similar style evening dresses and masks. Some were quietly eating the refreshments provided by the organizers, while others were whispering to each other about their goals for this trip. Siegfried held the Wanderer's Manual, and information about everyone in the hall continuously appeared in this magical book. Earls, viscounts, barons, merchants, and even clerics, all sorts of people were present. As Siegfried looked at this information, a cold smile curled at the corner of his mouth. He had gotten the leverage he needed. At this moment, the lights in the hall dimmed, and a man wearing extravagant and gaudy clothes on the second-floor platform spoke in a high-pitched voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this auction. On behalf of the organizers, I extend a warm welcome to all of you." A round of enthusiastic applause erupted from below. Kriemhild and Roland didn't applaud. In their eyes, this was just a celebration for beasts. Well then, without further ado, let's introduce the first item. Wow, I didn't expect such an exciting start. A shield of a Rose Knight, starting bid 1 copper mon. The Rose Knights, 5 years ago, they were the personal knight order of the Rose Queen, whose name was known throughout the continent. Each Rose Knight was 1 in 10,000, a battle-hardened warrior. Among them emerged super talents like Roland, who was acknowledged by Durandal. They were the Queen's Blade and the Kingdom's Shield. This knight order, built from scratch by the Rose Queen, brought new life to a dying kingdom. Time has changed. The peerless queen now rests in eternal sleep, and the knight order that once dominated the kingdom and even made the Ophis Emperor wary has been divided and dissolved by various factions. However, the crimson rose emblazoned on their shields remained the pride of every Rose Knight, symbolizing that era of reform and hope. A shield of a Rose Knight, starting bid 1 copper moan. Though Siegfried never witnessed that hopeful era, he could glimpse how admirable that time was, and how revered the queen was through Roland's current behavior. The Golden Knight's terrifying power was forcefully compressed within a radius of less than 2 meters. The enraged Roland was like a dangerous container of nitroglycerin. One slight touch could blow up the entire auction house. "You damn bastards." Siegfried looked at Roland in surprise. This genius knight was using all his strength to control his erupting emotions, keeping his presence below others' notice. To be honest, Siegfried hadn't wanted to bring Roland along. This hot-headed knight might ruin Siegfried's plans. But Catalina was even less reliable, and Yang Jing had other matters to attend to. With the team currently short on talent, they had no choice but to multitask. He had prepared 2 plans. If Roland didn't lose control, they would proceed with the original plan. If Roland did lose it, they would activate Plan B, kill everyone present without hesitation, grab the money and run, treating it like a one-time story quest. Roland was breathing heavily, cursing under his breath, but ultimately held himself back. This actually impressed Siegfried somewhat. Siegfried had planned to use Roland's behavior at this auction to determine whether he would be just a simple fighter in future plans or someone who could be trusted with details as a core member. "Ha ha ha, I bid 2 copper moan." "I bid 3. "What are you doing?" "This is a relic of the Great Queen." "I bid 5 copper moan." "I bid 10, don't fight me for it." Mocking laughter and a series of malicious bids rang out around them. Most of these people had been affected by the great reforms of that time, and now they were frantically taking revenge on the deceased Rose Queen in this way. Siegfried found it quite amusing. Whether on Earth or in another world, such things always followed the same pattern. However, just as he was secretly sneering, a clear, sweet voice rang through the auction house. "I bid 100,000 gold moan." Dead silence. Siegfried spat out the red wine he had just sipped. "Ha ha ha, which idiot would waste so much money on something like this?" He looked around to see what this sucker looked like, thinking maybe he could cozy up to them and scam some money. Not far away, a young lady in a black evening gown with gray hair was standing on tiptoes, with her hand raised high. Siegfried's smile instantly froze, and he rushed over in 3 quick steps. "What are you doing?" "This belonged to my mother, how could we let it fall into their hands? We don't have that much money to buy it. But according to the plan, we don't need to pay anyway." Well, that's true. After all, they didn't need to pay." The auctioneer was also stunned, taking a while to react. Young lady, did you say you're bidding 100,000 gold moan?" Gold moan, as the name suggests, was the official currency of the Kingdom of Moan. 1 gold moan equaled 100 silver moan, and 1 silver moan equaled 100 copper moan. A loaf of black bread on the market cost about 2 copper moan, and 1 gold moan was enough for a family of 3 to live comfortably in the capital for a year and a half. 100,000 gold moan, forget the shield, it was enough to buy this entire mansion. However, before the auctioneer could get a response, another somewhat flamboyant voice rang out. "I bid 150,000 gold moan." Hiss. Everyone drew in a sharp breath. What was going on? Did they have too much money to spend? Siegfried raised his hand, adding another 50,000 in one go. He had always wanted to try the thrill of throwing money around, and since they didn't have to pay, why not enjoy it properly? "This, sir, are you sure?" The auctioneer was sweating profusely, feeling he had encountered 2 lunatics today. "I must warn you, malicious bidding will be severely punished. You can still withdraw your bid now." Siegfried pulled out his invitation and waved it high above his head for all to see, shouting, "I am the president of the Loxier Merchant Association. I'm taking over this auction today. Remember, my name is Loxier. TCH, so it's that nouveau riche. Such tasteless things, this is why I say these country merchants. Never mind, if he wants to waste money on this thing, let him." Whispers arose around them. Apparently, this dead merchant was quite well known in the area. Seeing Siegfried's confidence, the auctioneer hesitated no more and struck his gavel. "Since there are no more bids, congratulations to Mr. Loxier on winning this item." The auction continued, with subsequent items being antiques, paintings, magical equipment, and other unremarkable items. However, This battle mage's armguard, starting bid 10,000 gold, moan. I bid 800,000. This porcelain from the ancient Turing dynasty, starting bid 20. I bid 1.8 million. The four of them, stationed at different corners, bid astronomical amounts, turning the auction into their bragging competition. Now not just the auctioneer, but all attendees were dumbfounded. What were they doing? Coming to cause trouble? Causing trouble in Count Constant's territory? Were they tired of living? The auctioneer was nearly in tears, as these four had claimed almost all items for the entire evening. Several times he wanted to stop the auction, but there was a special item in this auction, and the Count had specifically instructed that nothing should go wrong. He had thought about calling the guards to throw out these troublemakers, but among the four, there was one particularly tall and imposing figure who looked quite formidable. If things got ugly, they might not come out on top. The auctioneer had 10,000 curses in his heart but could only swallow them down and continue the auction with gritted teeth. After all, if these people couldn't produce the money later, they wouldn't be leaving this mansion. Worst case, they could hold another auction tomorrow. Below the stage, Siegfried noticed the time seemed about right. He put his finger to his temple and called out in his mind. Hey, Yang Jing, can you hear me? Soon, a cool voice responded in his mind. I'm here. They were both under historian Shannon's jurisdiction, and after signing that contract, they could communicate directly in their minds like this. The downside was that sometimes uncontrolled private thoughts would flow into each other's heads. Is everything settled? Yes. Thanks. Could you also check where that merchant's vault is? Get lost. Carrot. Just as their conversation ended, a black-clad maid hurriedly ran to the auctioneer's side and whispered something in his ear. The auctioneer's face showed clear surprise, but he quickly regained composure. He put on his enthusiastic smile again and announced in a high-pitched voice. We've just received news that before our final item of the night, we've decided to add a rather special item. Added last minute? What could it be? It's not on the list. Amidst the whispers, a provocatively dressed maid walked to the front with a tray carrying a peculiarly shaped glass vial. On the transparent bottle body was clearly engraved a string of letters not belonging to this world. L. What is that? A healing potion? Are you joking? No healing potion comes in that color. The host didn't explain immediately, instead letting the guests discuss among themselves. This was his tried-and-true tactic to build interest and maximize profits during the bidding phase. Once the murmurs from the audience subsided, he continued. This is a luxury item called perfume, provided by a lady from the capital. As for its effects, I believe a demonstration would be most convincing. The host unscrewed the cap and applied some of the pink liquid to the necks and arms of two nearby maids. These two maids, provocatively dressed and beautiful, walked through the crowd with seductive steps. They too were merchandise, available for purchase if any distinguished guest desired them. Wherever they passed, they left behind an intoxicating fragrance that lingered in the air. This is... Quick! Buy it! I must have this. You have to get it for me. The crowd immediately erupted in excitement, especially the female guests, who seemed completely defenseless against the fragrance. Meanwhile, the sharp-eyed merchants had already discerned the true nature of this so-called perfume. This perfume thing is quite interesting. What perfume? This is pure gold in liquid form. Siegfried, seated in a shadowy corner of the hall, couldn't suppress a smile. Yes, this item was his, or rather, something he had cleverly obtained from Yang Jing. Earlier, when he saw Yang Jing take out this bottle of Chanel from her inventory, he had already formed a plan. Although Shannon had said that technological products from other eras couldn't be removed from the inventory, perfume apparently didn't fall into that category. After much persuasion, Siegfried finally acquired this bottle of Chanel from Yang Jing, despite her obvious disgust. He would owe her 2 bottles later. Yang Jing's task this time was to negotiate with the organizers to add this item to the auction at the last minute. The negotiation had clearly succeeded, quite an achievement for that expressionless beauty. I believe you now understand the value of perfume. But please, don't be hasty. What we're auctioning is not this bottle of perfume, but rather... The host paused deliberately before continuing. It's formula. At this moment, Siegfried could clearly hear the collective intake of breath around him. How much money did you bring? Not nearly enough. I came for the final item. Damn it, who could have predicted such a business opportunity? Forget that one. We must secure this formula at any cost. The crowd, especially the merchants, was in an uproar. They understood that the production cost of this perfume was likely minimal, and they knew that once it became widespread, imitators would emerge. But they also realized that whoever obtained the formula first would have the chance to monopolize this new product's market, potentially becoming one of the leading merchant guilds in the Kingdom of Mon or even across the continent. As for whether the perfume would sell? A foolish question. One look at the ladies present, practically salivating, answered that. The starting bid is 500,000 gold mons, with minimum increments of 10,000. Though expensive, I trust you understand its value. 500,000 was merely the opening price. Acquiring the technique to craft this luxury item and marketing it to nobility and the upper class would yield annual returns far exceeding this amount. If they could develop an affordable version for common people, the profits would be astronomical. 550,000. 600,000. 700,000. Bids flew from the audience as soon as the host finished speaking. Siegfried participated too, adding 10,000 whenever bidding seemed to slow, drawing mockery from others. People assumed this nouveau riche had exhausted his funds earlier, hence his modest bids. Watching the rapidly climbing prices, Siegfried could barely contain his grin. In his 20-plus years, he'd never seen money flow so easily. So this was the power of being a transmigrator, absolutely fantastic. Just then, a leisurely voice cut through the chaos. Enough. 1 million. The venue fell silent for the first time. All eyes turned to the middle-aged man who had spoken. He was corpulent and broad-shouldered, every inch the wealthy merchant. A cigar rested between his fingers, occasionally releasing white smoke rings. The Wanderer's manual displayed his name, Courtman. Siegfried's eyebrows twitched. The target had taken the bait. Courtman, a slave trader, was the provider of the auction's final item and the true target of this plan. The perfume formula was merely bait. Siegfried didn't actually possess Chanel's formula. If he had, he'd be manufacturing perfume himself rather than participating in this auction. He'd even thought of a brand name, Signal. The corpulent middle-aged man stood up, removed his mask, and bowed to the crowd, announcing loudly. Good evening, everyone. I am Courtman. Our guild provided the final item in today's auction. I believe you're all familiar with our line of business. I hope you'll extend me this courtesy. In return, you'll all enjoy preferential rates in future dealings with our guild. Though his gestures were courteous, his tone dripped with arrogance, clearly considering the formula already his. The crowd fell silent. Not for the promised discounts, but out of wariness toward the figure behind the slave trading guild. For this guild to operate the slave trade in the southern region as mere commoners, they must have powerful backing. In truth, Courtman and his guild were merely extensions of that person, the true operator of the slave trade. Now that Courtman had bid, this fat man who'd remained silent all evening had finally shown his hand for this formula. The message was clear, his master wanted the perfume formula. What's their problem? Isn't their business big enough already? Quiet. Do you have a death wish? Whispers rippled through the crowd, everyone angry but afraid to speak out. Not only were they outmatched in power, but they were also on enemy territory. Any real conflict might prove fatal. Siegfried was seething. He'd estimated the formula could fetch at least 3 million or more, but this fat bastard's single statement had evaporated half that potential. You dog, blocking someone's wealth is like killing their parents. Just wait and see how I deal with you later. 1 million once, 1 million twice, 1 million 3 times. Sold. The host's gavel fell with unusual speed, as if fearing another bid. Keep hammering away. There won't be any formula, of course. But the money, that stays. Finally, the auction neared its end, signaling the arrival of the one everyone had been discussing. The audience held their breath. More than half had come specifically for this final item. They'd brought the majority of their wealth, determined to secure this last piece at any cost. The final item. Accompanying the host's elevated voice came the sharp clinking of iron chains. A muscular demi-human guard approached, holding 2 iron chains. At the other ends were 2 beautiful girls who looked like divine creations. A pair of young high-elf twins. Starting price, 3 million gold mons, minimum bid increments of 100,000 gold mons. In the dimly lit auction hall, two strikingly beautiful young girls with nearly identical features were dragged onto the stage, bound in chains. They wore deliberately torn prison uniforms, their exposed fair skin resembling exquisitely carved jade statues, emanating a soft radiance. Despite their tattered clothing and faces smeared with dirt and grime, their beauty remained undeniable. Both girls possessed deep, clear blue eyes like the ocean, cheeks as white and delicate as pearls, and soft cherry-red lips that tempted one to kiss them. Their ice-blue hair cascaded like shimmering waterfalls, captivating all who beheld them. The young girls clung to each other in fear, their pointed ears trembling incessantly. They saw the people below, those whose breathing intensified at the sight of them, eyes blazing with desire behind their masks, like animals in heat. So these are elves? Siegfried was also taken aback. He had thought Kriemhild was the epitome of beauty, but now he realized how naive he had been. This was, after all, another world. The crowd fell silent for a moment, stunned by the elven maiden's appearance. This calm before the storm was quickly shattered by a tsunami of frenzied bidding. The nobility and wealthy, who usually prided themselves on their elegance, now showed not a shred of dignity. The men among them surged towards the stage, holding up their number plates like a tidal wave, trying to catch glimpses of skin through the tears in the prison uniforms. Just as Kriemhild and the others had said, this was a feast for beasts. You might wonder, are two pretty elves really worth such madness? The answer is complex and requires an explanation of the magic system in the Qilong continent. As mentioned before, magic in this world isn't easily accessible. It requires three elements: magical power, intelligence, and elemental affinity. Among these, elemental affinity is undoubtedly the most crucial. Every creature in this world possesses elemental affinity, and the level of this affinity directly determines the tier of elemental magic one can use. Taking humans as an example, each person has affinities for the four basic elements: earth, fire, wind, and water. However, most people's affinities are low. No matter how hard they study magic, they can only manage minor tricks like shooting water or producing small flames. Such people are everywhere in the kingdom, their abilities more akin to parlor tricks than true magic. Siegfried affectionately dubbed these people without elemental affinity as muggles. The small percentage of humans with higher elemental affinities are recruited by various factions and sent to magic academies to become mages. While humans rely on luck for high elemental affinity, elves are different. Every elf is born with an extremely high affinity for a particular element, making them natural mages. Not only do they possess affinities for the four basic elements, but also for higher elements like lightning, forest, and ice, affinities impossible for humans to attain. Their elemental affinity is so strong that it manifests in their hair color. For instance, the ice-blue hair of these two elven girls likely indicates they are kin to the Ice Elf King from the far north ice forest. While there are various methods to increase magical power, ways to enhance elemental affinity are almost non-existent. Elemental affinity is so rare that any elixir or method to improve it would cause adventurers to fight tooth and nail for it. And elves are one such elixir. Don't misunderstand, this doesn't mean cooking and eating elves. It refers to the offspring produced by mating with elves, known as half-elves. Half-elves possess both human creativity and elven elemental affinity. In fact, the three elders among human nations, known as super-tier mages, are all half-elves. Our dear little brother Darren is one of them, a 6th-tier mid-level mage at a young age, surpassing 80% of human mages. His light green hair is proof of his high-level wind elemental affinity. Imagine what would happen if a family kept an elf captive. With their long lifespans, elves could produce generations of half-elves. After a century, an entire magical army of half-elves would emerge. At that point, not only could they dominate a region, but they could even establish their own kingdom. Moreover, elves are universally beautiful, eternally youthful, skilled in both magic and archery. They're ideal whether as playthings or trained as bodyguards. These twin girls, being young, would be even easier to mold. Now you can understand why these people are so frenzied. The so-called other world isn't something to be envied. Unless you're the protagonist, you'd likely end up like these elven girls, at the mercy of others. Fortunately, Siegfried is the protagonist. 2 billion. An ice-cold voice echoed through the auction hall. The farce had gone on long enough, and sufficient evidence had been gathered. It was time to act. From the shadows emerged a man in a black suit with a hood, walking slowly. The crowd instinctively parted, creating a path for him. He stood there, as if he were the protagonist of the world. The host's face contorted, but maintaining professional composure, he suppressed his anger and reminded. Mr. Loxier, I mentioned earlier that reckless bidding would be punished. Did you not hear me? I said, 2 billion. I want these 2 elves. Are you insane? The kingdom's tax revenue for 10 years doesn't amount to that much. Where did you conjure up such money? The host was so enraged, his nose seemed to twist. He had never encountered someone so unreasonable. Did this person have a death wish? Heh, is that so? I don't know about the kingdom's tax revenue. But I do know that today, you won't earn a single coin. Enough. I've had it. Guards. Guards, drag this madman out of here. The double doors on both sides of the auction hall burst open as 2 squads of fully armed soldiers rushed in, grabbing Siegfried's arms to haul him away. Being dragged out meant being taken outside and executed, followed by a thorough purge of this person's influence in Count Constantine's domain. Amidst the intense struggle, the black hood slowly slipped off. Exposed to the light was a head of jet-black short hair, dark as the night sky. Silence fell. The host who had been fuming moments ago fell silent. The crowd that had been mocking Siegfried fell silent. The soldiers gripping Siegfried's arms fell silent. The entire world fell silent. No moment tonight had been as quiet as this. The black-haired man was like a black hole. He stood there motionless, yet he absorbed all sound, all gazes. Even the dazzling radiance of the 2 elven girls was crushed to dust beneath this black hole. Siegfried slowly removed the mask from his face, revealing the delicate features of a smiling young man. It wasn't the face of the merchant Loxier. No one here recognized this smiling youth. But they recognized that black hair, those black eyes now filled with mockery and derision. They watched as the gentle smile on the black-haired youth's face twisted uncontrollably, gradually transforming into an intensely cold sneer. What exactly, do you think you're doing? You're not Loxier? The host wanted to slap himself as soon as he asked this question. What a foolish thing to say. Of course this wasn't Loxier. Loxier? Oh, you mean that merchant. He's dead. As for me, do I need to introduce myself? No, Mr. Milan. I must be blind. I was just running my mouth thoughtlessly. Is that so? From the looks of things here, you were aiming for more than just running your mouths, weren't you? Siegfried spread his arms wide, palms facing upward, letting out an arrogant laugh. Ha ha ha, let me tell you a secret, I'm not even a hero yet. You're all welcome to try your luck. As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 soldiers standing behind him who had been grabbing his shoulders suddenly stiffened. Their heads rolled off their necks with a thud, landing precisely in Siegfried's outstretched palms, a truly horrifying sight. Crimson fountains erupted from the headless bodies, spraying a shower of blood across the elegant banquet hall. The black-haired youth stood there holding 2 severed heads, bathed in the red rain, his white teeth gleaming in a chilling smile as he shouted defiantly. Come on. In that moment, everyone remembered a crucial fact. The hero of the Milan family was known as the God of Death. As the 2 bodies collapsed limply to the floor, the crowd finally reacted. How did they die? A hero. Why is a hero here? I didn't buy anything. Please have mercy, noble hero. Me too, I was just here to look around. They screamed and wailed, desperately pressing themselves against the walls, trying to get as far from that demon as possible since Siegfried was blocking the exit. Siegfried ignored their panic because he himself was so terrified his legs had turned to jelly. Yangjing. What have you done? Didn't you ask for a shocking entrance? It's meaningless if I'm shocked too. Those 2 soldiers had been killed by Yangjing. Though he didn't know what method she'd used, it was definitely her handiwork. Siegfried had asked her to arrange an impressive entrance, since she was skilled at such things. Well, impressive wasn't quite the word for this outcome. Terrifying would be more accurate. This wasn't a hero's entrance, it was more fitting for a demon king. However, despite holding 2 severed heads and shaking legs, Siegfried's greatest strength was his exceptional psychological resilience. He casually tossed the heads aside, cleared the path, and smoothly recited the names of all participants. Viscount Stewart, Baron Morton, Mr. Benays, Father Prenhol, and all you other pieces of trash, I've noted down every single one of your names. If any of you breathe a word about what you've witnessed tonight to anyone, in any way, I promise your fate will be far worse than these two. Don't speak. Keep your mouths shut. You have 10 seconds to grab your heads and scramble out of here, pretending to be in panic. Anyone still here after 10 seconds dies. The nobles and wealthy merchants rushed toward the exit like drowning men grasping at straws. Though they were panic-stricken and terrified, none dared to scream. The terrifying Mylan had ordered their silence. A corpulent figure tried to blend into the crowd, being pushed toward the door. Siegfried spotted the slave trader Courtman attempting to slip away and let out a cold snort. "Roland, do it." From a corner of the hall, a gleaming knight's sword whistled through the air, precisely piercing the collar of Courtman's formal attire. The man's heavy body was lifted into the air by the flying sword and pinned to the wall. "Mr. Courtman, where do you think you're going?" Courtman's fat frame trembled violently, nearly fainting from fear. He felt deeply wronged. He was just a minor manager handling accounts for the association. The major deals and despicable schemes were all the president's doing. Even if the hero wanted to kill someone, it shouldn't be him. Hero, I was wrong. I shouldn't have done this business. Please spare my life, I'll never dare to do it again." If he hadn't been pinned to the wall, he would have been kowtowing frantically. That formula of mine was quite valuable. 1 million seems rather low, don't you think? That formula was yours? I didn't know, I truly didn't know. Had I known, how would I dare to lowball your price? His crotch was already soaked, emitting a pungent odor. Siegfried covered his nose in disgust. "You have the nerve to deal in slaves, but you're not prepared to die? I deserve death, I deserve death." Still pinned to the wall, Courtman began slapping himself vigorously. He put such effort into it that his already swollen face became even more bloated. Siegfried reached out to remove the sword but found he couldn't budge it after several attempts. He withdrew his hand sheepishly, maintaining a casual expression as he continued. "Don't worry, I won't kill you. I'm here to do business today. Just killing you like this? That would be too wasteful." Siegfried turned away and ascended to the second-floor platform where Kriemhild and the others were waiting. The host was kneeling on the ground, trembling uncontrollably. Sean felt like he had seen a ghost today. A perfectly normal auction had first been disrupted by a madman, then by 3 troublemakers. He had thought himself patient for holding back until the end, but he had struck an iron plate and shattered his knuckles in the process. For the first time, he cursed the auction's rule of hidden identities. Had he known from the start this was a Mylan, he would have given away all the goods without a single word of protest if asked. Now it was too late, he had angered the man, and his life hung by a thread. "Mr. Host, let me see, Sean, is it? Were you the one who wanted to drag me out earlier?" Sean pressed his forehead to the ground, too terrified to speak, just trembling nonstop. "Don't be so quiet. That's no fun." Siegfried grabbed Sean's hair and yanked his head up. "Tell Constantine to enjoy himself while he can. His days are numbered." Siegfried had 2 purposes for personally attending this auction. The first was to establish a connection with Courtman. The second was to send a message to Count Constantine through the auction organizer that a Mylan was in his city and knew about his slave trade operations. Without doubt, Count Constantine would be so terrified he couldn't sleep, constantly fearing this Mylan might come for his head. His next moves would be predictable. He would gather all available troops to guard his mansion, which would inevitably weaken the search for the princess, thus reducing pressure on Siegfried. The Count's mansion would need to be dealt with eventually, but not like this. For now, the priority was raising funds and gathering talent. He stood up, no longer looking at Sean cowering on the ground. "I'll spare your worthless life. Just remember to deliver my message, understood? Bring Courtman. We're leaving." After leaving the mansion, the group of 4 split into 2 teams. Kriemhild and Roland took the twin elves and the spoils from the mansion back to the Stallion Banner first. Siegfried took Bobo and Courtman to their trading company to discuss business. "Lord Hero, what exactly are you planning to do?" "I told you, to discuss business with your company." In the carriage, Siegfried and Courtman sat facing each other. Courtman was completely bewildered, as this hero had been speaking in riddles the whole way. Business? What business? Would a hero ever be short of money? These divine-like figures could get whatever they wanted. Local lords would rush to welcome them with their entire families, eager to fulfill any request. Was there any need for business? Cortman strongly suspected this man simply wanted to follow him to the company headquarters and then take over the entire operation. Thinking of this, Cortman broke into a cold sweat, his bladder threatening to give way again. Siegfried noticed Cortman's concerns and pointed at Bobo, who was driving the carriage. Don't be so tense. I'm not against slavery, see him? He's a slave. Isn't that right, Bobo? Yes, my lord. I am your faithful servant. Bobo immediately turned his head with a fawning smile, his demeanor so subservient it made Siegfried sick. This was supposed to be an act, but Bobo was clearly being genuine. He was no longer a slave, but the servile nature ingrained in his bones remained unchanged. This garden person made Siegfried very uncomfortable, as if he was deliberately degrading himself. Siegfried couldn't understand why he had developed such a personality. Siegfried believed that while a person didn't need to be clever, kind, or capable, they must have dignity. He thought highly of this garden person scout. According to the Wanderer's Manual, Bobo had B-rank leadership ability. In his plans, if Yangjing ever left, the position of intelligence director would be given to Bobo. Loyalty could be cultivated, skills could be trained, but if this garden person degraded himself like this, what was the point? What subordinate would follow such a worthless superior? Siegfried's mood darkened, but across from him, Cortman felt like the clouds had parted. So this hero doesn't oppose slavery after all. That makes sense. Many past heroes had companions who were former slaves. Is he here to negotiate the price of the formula? At this thought, Cortman wanted to slap himself. The boss had actually given him 2 million gold mon in funds, telling him that if there were any good items at the auction, he should acquire them at a low price and resell them through the company. The more money Cortman saved, the more he could keep for himself. So greed had led him to try to snatch the formula at a low price and pocket the remaining funds. Who knew he'd end up losing more than he gained, pulling the tiger's tail instead of wool? Lord Hero, for that formula, I'm willing to offer. Cortman gritted his teeth, 3 million gold mon. Would that be acceptable? Siegfried's eyebrows twitched. It seemed the slave merchant had misunderstood again. He waved his hand. I'm not here to discuss the formula, though since you mentioned it, have the 3 million loaded onto the carriage later. Huh? Then what did you want to discuss? When meeting a slave merchant, naturally it's to buy slaves. You want to purchase slaves? A hero wanting to buy slaves? Had finding companions become so difficult for heroes these days? Could it be that this Lord Milan isn't very likable? Well, looking at his arrogant demeanor, he probably doesn't have many friends. Siegfried could tell at a glance that Cortman was thinking something impolite. He gave Cortman a cold look, making him immediately sit up straight. How many slaves does your company have? I'm not sure of the exact number, but around 200 or so. So many. What a jackpot, this is going to be profitable. Take me directly to your market. I need quite a few. Lord Hero, may I boldly ask what you need so many slaves for? What for? To form an army and take over the Earl's territory, of course. Siegfried raised his eyelids, giving Cortman a strange look. You want to know? Cortman felt his heart turn cold. He hurriedly shook his head, his fat jiggling violently with the motion. No. I don't want to know, not at all. Oh, then hurry up and lead the way. 67, Golden Wheat Street, Hoover Trading Company Headquarters. Hilton Hoover lounged in his executive chair, gleefully counting today's profits for the company. He was once the largest slave trader and human trafficker in the Kingdom of Mon, controlling several powerful mercenary groups. These mercenary groups would capture people from all over the continent, and the Hoover Trading Company would then categorize these slaves of various races. Some were sold to the empire as cheap labor, some to the royal family as loyal assassins, and others to nobles with peculiar tastes. In that era when slave trade was both reasonable and legal, the Hoover Trading Company surpassed the Galloway Trading Company with its strong hard power and extensive trade network, becoming the undisputed #1 trading company in the kingdom, enjoying unparalleled prominence. However, all of this vanished into thin air 20 years ago when the Rose Queen took control. That iron-fisted queen mercilessly cracked down on the Hoover Trading Company's branches throughout the kingdom. His once powerful mercenaries, who had ravaged various regions, were no match for the Rose Knight Order. Hilton Hoover himself nearly died in the crackdown. The vast commercial empire collapsed overnight, and the Rose Queen used the blood of the Hoover Trading Company to prove her determination for reform to the world. Those were Hilton's darkest days. He cowered in dark, hidden corners every day, with that bright red rose like a curse clinging to his bones. Every night, he would dream of those Deathbringers wielding rose-emblazoned shields, bursting through his door, to chop off his head. But he finally made it through. The Rose Queen died. She died so suddenly, so unexpectedly, that Hilton initially thought it was a trap to lure him out of hiding. Ha 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 ha, you're dead after all. No matter how much power you wielded, how brilliant your strategies were, how vigorous you seemed, you still died before me. This was the first thing Hilton said when he finally basked in the sunlight again. Hilton resumed his old trade. He gathered his surviving old subordinates and, with the strong support of Earl Constantine, re-established his company in this remote region. This time, he was smarter. He didn't just deal in slave trade, he also used legitimate businesses to cover his underground trade. He was confident that even if that queen could crawl out of her grave, she wouldn't be able to catch him red-handed again. The more Hilton thought about it, the happier he became. He stretched lazily in his chair, letting out a comfortable moan. Ah, I wonder how much today's goods sold for. Those twin elf girls were obtained through special channels. He didn't know exactly how they were captured from under the nose of that terrifying Ice Elf King. But that wasn't important. What mattered was that they could bring him profit. Hilton's body grew hot. Although he was nearly 60, he could never suppress his desires when thinking about those pitiful twin sisters. In his mind, he fantasized about how he would indulge with those two beauties tonight. Yes, he never intended to sell the elf twins. He was just using this auction to scam those foolish nobles out of their money. When they jubilantly thought they could take the girls away, the Hoover Trading Company's mercenaries would pose as bandits and ambush them halfway. Money, people, and lives, they wouldn't be able to take any of it away. Hilton's power, or rather the power behind Hilton, was just that formidable. As Hilton was immersed in his sweet dreams, the office door was suddenly pushed open with a bang. "Master, something terrible has happened." "What are you doing? Haven't I told you to knock before entering?" Hilton angrily glared at this brainless female secretary. If it weren't for her decent looks that provided some relaxation after work, he would have fired this useless woman long ago. The female secretary was startled by Hilton's loud rebuke and froze in place, momentarily flustered. Seeing her frightened again, Hilton shook his head with amusement. Timidity and high obedience were among the few merits of this female secretary. Hilton walked up to the female secretary, softened his expression, and wrapped his arms around her waist. His hands restlessly kneaded the secretary's body. The night was still young, and Hilton decided to have some fun with this secretary before the two elves were sent back. So, his voice softened as well. "All right, stop crying. Remember to knock next time, you never learn. Now, tell me, what happened this time?" It was probably just some trivial matter like a slave dying or escaping. This secretary was completely incapable of filtering the importance of matters, always reporting everything to him. The secretary's face flushed red. This wasn't the first time such a thing had happened, but she dared not resist, nor could she. "Master, the goods sent to the auction, they've been stolen." Hilton was unfazed, his hands already caressing the secretary's smooth thighs. At times like this, a man's brain tends to react slowly. As expected, it's just another minor. "What did you say?" Hilton suddenly reacted, almost screaming. His mind instantly cleared. What happened? Where's Courtman? Wasn't he in charge of delivering the goods? Hilton's wrinkled old face was filled with rage. His hands gripped the secretary's shoulders so tightly they almost dug into her flesh. The secretary was in so much pain that tears fell, but she still didn't dare to resist. "Ugh, I don't know either. I heard it from an employee who escaped from the auction site." "Escaped? What do you mean escaped? What exactly happened?" Just then, there was a knock on the door. Hilton turned to look. A fat man with a large belly was standing there. His face still showed traces of fear, his flab trembling slightly, and there was a wet patch on his pants. It was Courtman. "Courtman? Master, I'm back." "You're back? Where are the goods?" What's with your appearance? What exactly happened? The enraged Hilton fired off 4 questions in succession, frightening Cortman so much that he shook even more violently. Master, perhaps you should come out and see for yourself. No need to trouble yourself. I've already come in on my own. A voice full of mockery came from outside the door. Hilton looked towards the source of the voice. Standing there was a young man with black hair and black eyes, holding a book in his hands. He wore an elegant smile on his face and politely bowed to Hilton. Mr. Hoover, I have some business to discuss with you. At that moment, Hilton felt his blood run cold. The Adventurers Tavern Stallion banner. Roland gazed at the room filled with loot, all snatched from the auction site. Everything that had been on offer today was here, including the Rose Knight's shield. It could be said that the haul was substantial. Kriemhild sat on the floor, excitedly rummaging through the items. She appraised the antiques and equipment with her years of experience in high society, jotting down the values in her personal notebook. The young woman's eyes grew brighter as she looked. This unexpected windfall would not only clear the village's debts, but also allow their current team to rest and recuperate for a good while. But Roland's mood was heavy, unable to find any joy in the situation. He held a mug of celebratory ale, but the golden liquid within hadn't decreased by even a drop. On the bed, 2 elven maidens with ice-blue hair huddled together, trembling. Although they had left the auction house and the chains around their necks had been cut by Roland, the terror in their eyes showed no signs of abating. Even with the language barrier causing some communication difficulties, Siegfried and his group were still their saviors. They shouldn't be this frightened. The source of the problem was obvious. Siegfried Milan, is he really a hero? Roland murmured this name, a question he had asked himself many times in his heart. The image of that blood-soaked figure, laughing maniacally while holding a severed head, flashed in his mind. Perhaps there were heroes who enjoyed killing, but they took pleasure in slaying evil. Heroes held an absolute respect for life itself, otherwise, they wouldn't become heroes. But Siegfried. Roland had a strange feeling. He felt as if, in that man's eyes, this world wasn't real. That's why he could be so indifferent to life. The moment those 2 guards showed signs of abnormality, Roland had shielded Kriemhild's eyes, preventing the princess from witnessing that horrifying scene. If Roland hadn't fought against the undead court of the demon race on the front lines before, able to sense the aura of death when life faded, he wouldn't have been able to detect the guard's abnormality so quickly. At that moment, Roland hadn't sensed any fluctuations in magic or aura, meaning those 2 guards didn't die from magic or martial techniques, but from something more bizarre. In the eyes of these 2 pairs of twins, our group probably seemed no kinder than the slave traders, perhaps even more terrifying. At least the slave traders didn't laugh while holding severed heads. As Roland was lost in worried thoughts, the princess's slightly puzzled voice came. Huh? What's this? Roland looked over in response. Kriemhild, who had been tallying the loot, was pulling out a black tapestry embroidered with a strange skull from the pile. One glance, and his pupils constricted sharply. The wooden mug slipped from his hand. Clang. You fool. Can't you even manage a cup of tea? Hot tea spilled all over the floor as Hilton Hoover glared angrily at his clumsy female secretary. He was increasingly regretting his choice of this stupid woman as his secretary. Weren't there plenty of smart women who could perform well both in and out of bed? Why did he have to hire such an idiot? I deeply apologize, Lord Siegfried. Our staff is truly incompetent. I will make sure to discipline her thoroughly later. On the other hand, his attitude towards Siegfried was extremely respectful, as if he would get down on his knees and lick his shoes if he could. Siegfried didn't even glance at the fawning Hilton, instead browsing through the Wanderer's handbook in his hand. Hilton's experiences from previous years were laid bare before Siegfried's eyes. Unfortunately, the experiences of the last 5 years were blank. It seemed that no Wanderer had contacted him since the Rose Queen's death. This phenomenon made Siegfried notice something. Perhaps behind every major change on the Qilong continent, there were Wanderers like him pulling strings behind the scenes. He closed the handbook and said in a neutral tone. No need. I didn't come here for tea anyway. How can that be? A noble from the Milan family gracing our humble establishment is an honor beyond measure. How could I not fulfill my duties as a host? Siegfried raised an eyebrow, giving Hilton an odd look. Hilton, if you're hoping Constantine will send troops to save you, I advise you to give up that idea. He can barely save himself now. Hilton's body suddenly stiffened, a bead of cold sweat rolling down his forehead. Mr. Siegfried, what are you talking about? I don't understand your meaning. You don't understand? Siegfried sneered, picking up a cookie from the tea table and biting into it with a sharp crunch. Snap. Hilton's expensive fur coat, along with his belt and trousers, was split in half right down the middle. The old man's withered body and limp member were instantly exposed to the air. The clothing was shredded, but there wasn't a single scratch on his body. A strike of godlike skill. Hilton fell on his backside, his face pale, cold sweat pouring down his neck. Hilton, do you understand now? I. This business tycoon who had dominated the kingdom's commerce despairingly realized one thing: probably all the guards in the entire Earl's mansion combined wouldn't be enough for this monster to kill. Don't be so tense. I've already made it very clear, I really am just here to buy slaves. Yes. I understand. Good. Then take me to your market. I want to see your merchandise with my own eyes. Ah, yes, of course. Please follow me. The female secretary took a brand new coat from the wardrobe and handed it to Hilton. Judging by her reddened face, she was clearly trying hard not to burst out laughing. It was truly amusing to see the usually domineering and arrogant master behaving as meekly as a rabbit in front of this young gentleman. Courtman, clean this place up. My lord, please come with me. Hilton, having changed into new clothes, put on a fawning smile once again. He gestured politely to Siegfried, his form of address changing from sir to my lord. However, in his heart, Hilton had already cursed Siegfried's ancestors to the 18th generation. You Mylan family are all bastards, freaks, may you die a horrible death. The poor Mylan family was cursed for no reason, because of this non-existent family member, Siegfried. The two walked out of the Commerce Guild building one after the other, with Bobo waiting outside. The short and chubby Bobo, upon seeing Siegfried emerge, immediately greeted him with a beaming smile, trotting over excitedly. However, when he clearly saw the person beside Siegfried, his body suddenly froze, the smile solidifying on his face. Siegfried was waiting for Bobo to run over and say something ingratiating like, "Is my lord well?" But he found that this usually cunning garden person with skin as thick as city walls was standing there dumbfounded, a look of terror on his face. Siegfried was puzzled. This guy had become quite familiar with him over the past couple of days. Although they weren't exactly on joking terms, he should at least have the guts to exchange a few pleasantries. What's wrong? I haven't bullied him recently, have I? Has he seen a ghost? Siegfried soon got the answer to this question. Oh? Isn't this Bobo? Lord Hilton. Siegfried looked over in surprise. He saw Hilton enthusiastically walking forward, as if reuniting with an old friend after a long separation. He skillfully squatted down and patted Bobo's head. Haha, it's been so long. Weren't you taken away by the Moan royal family? How did you end up here? I was. Faced with Hilton's casual questioning, Bobo was behaving very abnormally. This usually glib garden person was now so frightened he couldn't even form a complete sentence. Oh, I see. You were abandoned by the royal family, weren't you? So you decided to come back to me. Ha ha ha, that's great, perfect timing. I'm short-handed right now. Siegfried understood halfway through. Bobo was a garden person slave sold to the Moan royal family. Before that, who was his slave master? By the looks of it, this master and slave pair were meeting again after more than 20 years. Judging from Bobo's behavior, the relationship between the two must have been very harmonious enough to be etched in memory. Siegfried looked at the triumphant Hilton, then at the terrified and trembling Bobo, and said in an odd tone. This is quite unexpected. You two know each other? Hilton's old face was beaming with joy. He wasn't a fool, he could guess why Bobo was here. It must be because he had become Lord Mylan's slave. The old man's anxious heart finally settled. He had been worried that Siegfried might be here to do something like liberating slaves. After all, heroes always fight for justice. But now it seemed that this Lord Mylan didn't oppose slavery at all, so what was he afraid of? It should be said that birds of a feather flock together, and this saying was not wrong at all. Although Hilton and Courtman were about 10 years apart in age, their thoughts at this moment were surprisingly consistent. The moment they saw Bobo the slave, they both regarded Siegfried as one of their own. Hilton now found Siegfried much more pleasing to the eye, even feeling a sense of kindred spirits meeting, regretting not having met earlier. "My lord, you don't know, this garden person used to be mine. His family was in dire straits and couldn't afford to raise him, so they entrusted him to me. I took care of him for a while, and later he caught the eye of a lord in the palace and went to the court. I never expected that after changing hands several times, he would end up with you, Lord Milan. It seems we truly have a fateful connection." Ha 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 ha. The old man was so enthusiastic he seemed ready to become sworn brothers with Siegfried on the spot, apparently having completely forgotten what had happened in the office earlier. However, this fellow is just a mediocre half-baked one among garden people. He knows nothing about dark magic, and his stealth abilities are just so. I have better goods than him. I'll introduce some to you later. Garden people are a type of demi-human, classified along with dwarves, half-beasts, goblins, and others as demi-human races. Garden people are short like dwarves, but unlike dwarves who are all barrel-shaped, garden people's body types are not much different from ordinary humans. They're just a bit shorter, actually quite similar to human children. They have long lifespans and develop slowly. A 36-year-old male garden person like Bobo would look similar to a 15 or 16-year-old human boy in appearance. The biggest difference between garden people and humans is their grayish-white skin color and 6 symmetrical flesh whiskers on their faces. These flesh whiskers help them accurately capture the flow of magic in the air, so even if they close their eyes while running, they won't bump into walls. The most distinctive feature of garden people is their very rare affinity for the dark element. Apart from them, only the dark elves and the fallen angel court of the demon race possess this special elemental affinity on the continent. They can create shadows to hide in even on a clear, sunny day, and combined with their flesh whiskers, they can infiltrate any fortress without a trace. It can be said that catching a garden person in stealth mode is almost impossible. Unless you're one of those cheaters from the Milan family using Eagle Eye to see the entire map. Or. Siegfried looked at Bobo's face, completely devoid of flesh whiskers, with only 6 scars so faint they were almost invisible. Or, this garden person had been mutilated, cruelly deprived of the flesh whiskers used to sense magic on his face. My lord, let me tell you, this guy used to always want to be some kind of minstrel when he was young. He would sing all day long for no reason. Just look at that voice of his, what could he possibly sing? Hilton was still chattering away. Siegfried bent down, his tone unusually gentle. Bobo, you can still sing? This lowly one used to be able to. Ha ha ha, my lord, you jest. How could a dwarf like him sing anything? I found him noisy back then, so I scalded his throat with boiling water. From that day on, the guild became much quieter. To be honest, I think his current voice, which sounds like a pig squealing, is much more pleasant to hear. Is that so, Bobo? Siegfried's tone was very gentle and calm. He had never spoken to this garden person in such a gentle tone before. He hoped to get an answer from the garden person's own mouth now. Bobo's face turned pale. He lowered his head, clenching his fists uncontrollably, shaking. Siegfried could even hear the grinding of his tightly clenched teeth. Finally, he raised his face, wearing a distorted smile that looked worse than crying. That's right, that's right. This lowly one's voice indeed sounds like a pig squealing. It's dirtying the ears of you 2 great lords, ahahaha. Siegfried frowned in displeasure. He didn't get the answer he wanted. He had been prepared. If Bobo had given the answer he wanted, Siegfried would have unhesitatingly ended the plan early and killed Hilton on the spot. I see, so this is your shekel? Siegfried pointed his chin towards the front and said. That's enough catching up. Let's get moving. Of course, please come this way. Hilton led Siegfried around to the warehouse in the backyard. The guards at the warehouse door, seeing the boss personally escorting a customer, hurriedly opened the door. From inside, a wide passage leading underground was revealed. Siegfried didn't even blink before preparing to go down. He wasn't worried at all about these people setting up an ambush to kill him underground or anything like that. The reliable intelligence director, Comrade Yang Jing, was always secretly protecting the major shareholder's safety, and incidentally helping Siegfried show off a bit. Siegfried thought Yang Jing's psychic abilities were truly miraculous, making him drool with envy. Now that's living the ice guy life, drawing your sword to fight injustice wherever you see it. Unlike himself, who could only bluff with words to intimidate people. Just as Siegfried was about to follow Hilton down, he noticed that directly opposite this warehouse was another similar warehouse. But that warehouse had no guards, and for some reason, Siegfried felt there was something indescribably strange about it. He looked closely and saw that the door of that warehouse was sealed with no entry tape. These seals emitted strong magical fluctuations, but it was a type of magical fluctuation Siegfried had never felt before. It didn't belong to any of the elements like earth, fire, wind, water, light, or darkness. Siegfried also noticed that these seals had a strange symbol on them. It was a skull with an odd expression, as if crying, with a crescent scythe piercing through the top of the skull. Curiosity piqued, he pointed towards that warehouse and asked, "What's that warehouse used for?" However, Hilton's answer made his hair stand on end. "My lord, what are you talking about? There's no warehouse there." The confusion on Hilton's face wasn't fake. Siegfried, who was proficient in cold reading, could guarantee that. There are only three explanations for this situation: either there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with him, or there's something wrong with this world. Siegfried's eyes narrowed. He decided to probe further. "I'm talking about that warehouse right there, the one sealed with no entry tape." Hilton's expression grew even more confused. "My lord, I truly don't understand what you're referring to. There's nothing there but an empty lot. We've been planning to build another warehouse there, but construction hasn't started yet." Siegfried fell silent. He looked at Bobo, who was standing nearby, and asked, "Bobo, can you see that warehouse?" Bobo looked in the direction Siegfried was pointing, his expression puzzled. "This lowly one apologizes, but I don't see any warehouse there, my lord." Siegfried's expression turned grave. He walked towards the empty lot, ignoring Hilton's calls behind him. As he approached, he could feel an increasingly strong, bizarre energy emanating from that space. It was unlike any magic he had encountered before. When he was about 10 steps away from the warehouse, Siegfried suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. An inexplicable fear gripped his heart, as if some primal instinct was warning him not to go any closer. He stopped in his tracks, staring intently at the warehouse that only he could see. What exactly is this place? Why can only I see it? As these thoughts raced through his mind, Siegfried made a decision. He turned back to Hilton and said, "Let's continue with our business. Show me your merchandise." Hilton, who had been anxiously waiting, breathed a sigh of relief and quickly led Siegfried towards the underground passage. As they descended, Siegfried cast one last glance at the mysterious warehouse. The skull symbol on the seal seemed to grin at him mockingly. "I'll definitely uncover your secrets," Siegfried thought to himself as he disappeared into the underground passage. Little did he know, this encounter would mark the beginning of a journey that would shake the very foundations of the Qilong continent. Like every living being in this world, the deities of the Qilong continent are also divided into two factions. One faction stands on the side of order. For example, Sors, the sun god, is the main deity of the sun god religion and the state religion of the Kingdom of Mon. Just look at the name of the golden capital, Andasors, and you'll know how powerful this sect is in the kingdom. Another example is the harvest goddess. Her harvest churches are scattered throughout villages across the Qilong continent. Although not very powerful, they have a vast number of followers. Almost every farmer believes in the harvest goddess. After all, everyone hopes for a yield of 1,800 per mu. Additionally, dwarves worship the god of craftsmanship, the Empire believes in the god of truth, and the Beast Alliance worships their beast god. The elves, however, don't believe in gods, they only worship their elven king. These gods are the support for many beings on the Qilong continent. In times without heroes, people rely on the divine miracles bestowed by the gods to fight against the demon race. Those who stand on the side of chaos are the so-called evil gods. They're called evil gods not because they're particularly crazy or bloodthirsty, but purely because they help the demon folk fight against humans. Like the righteous gods, they are merciful to their followers and bestow divine miracles upon warriors seeking breakthroughs. Of course, the prerequisite is devout faith in them. It's not uncommon for beings of the Order faction to worship deities of the Chaos faction. People care about which faction a deity stands with, but deities don't care whether their followers are human or demon. The god of death is a prime example. He has a wide following both in the demon continent and the Qilong continent. After all, both humans and demons are mortal. He is also the deity worshipped by all undead creatures in this world, and the undead court of the demon race enshrines the god of death as their main deity. If nothing unexpected happens, the warehouse before his eyes is probably the stronghold of those death god followers hiding in the kingdom. Siegfried felt he had truly stepped into a nest of vipers. The small Hoover Commerce Guild was involved in both human trafficking and cult worship. It was like they were cultivating poison here. It felt like entering what should be a novice dungeon, but because of taking a wrong turn, you end up facing a boss that's impossible to beat in the early game. Siegfried had played a game called Soul 3 before, where he accidentally killed an old lady NPC due to carelessness, resulting in an early trigger of the dancer boss fight. Siegfried wasn't the type to play games with walkthroughs. He stubbornly fought the dancer for 3 days and nights, breaking 2 controllers, before uninstalling the game. Now he was experiencing that same frustrating feeling in another world. A newbie village should be designed like a newbie village. Why add all these complicated traps? Isn't this just setting people up? This world really has no game balance. He suspected that the reason Hilton couldn't see it was probably because the old man was of the Order faction and not a follower of the Death God. While he and Yang Jing could see it because they were outsiders, with neutral alignment. Siegfried awkwardly averted his gaze and said to Yang Jing, "I think this has nothing to do with us. We should report it to the Adventurers Guild later." Agreed. These 2 outsiders were both quite fond of their lives. Hilton was a bit panicked, suspecting there might be something unclean in his mansion. "My lord? What exactly happened?" "Nothing, I just saw wrong. Let's go." Siegfried had no intention of telling Hilton the truth. Let these damned human traffickers and cultists love each other here. Passing through the tunnel to the underground, the environment here was damp and dark, the air filled with a nauseating mix of excrement and mold. Siegfried saw many black iron cages piled around, inside which were emaciated, skeletal, low-grade slaves. The Wanderer's Handbook showed that most of them were humans and ugly half-beasts, with overall ratings not exceeding D grade. These low-grade slaves had limited use and were usually sold cheaply to landlords as serfs. In these iron cages less than 2 meters long and wide, 3 to 4 slaves were crammed, some even packed with 7 or 8. Siegfried thought these slave traders must have at least 80% proficiency in space planning. These starving slaves immediately rushed to the edge of the cages upon seeing Siegfried, with dozens of hands reaching out trying to grab his ankles. The guards following Hilton immediately raised their whips and lashed fiercely at those withered hands. They howled hoarsely, emitting a series of unintelligible syllables. Fearing they might plot a rebellion, Hilton had ordered the tongues of these low-grade slaves to be cut out and their throats scalded. But Siegfried could guess what these poor people wanted to say. "Please. Take me away." Siegfried had always thought he wasn't a good person, understanding the weak but not sympathizing with them. If necessary, he would also step on others to achieve his goals. But how could human dignity be trampled upon like this? A fierce anger began to burn in his heart. Siegfried looked at Hilton, who was boasting about this slave market beside him, and a hint of viciousness appeared on his face. "Old man, how exactly will you die?" "I'm looking forward to it." "You. Mr. Hilton, you're not just planning to show me these, are you?" These slaves were emaciated and mostly diseased, far from meeting the requirements for forming an army. "My lord, don't be impatient. These are the most inferior goods we have. The main event is yet to come." Led by Hilton, Siegfried came to a spacious and bright corridor. Here, magic luminous stones were set for lighting every 5 steps. The environment was clean and tidy, and even the air was fresh, clearly designed with a ventilation system. On both sides of the corridor were individual cells, and the slaves confined here were the so-called high-end commodities. Siegfried observed them, with the Wanderer's Handbook constantly displaying information about these high-grade slaves. From stunningly beautiful half-elves to powerful half-beasts, from noble young ladies to captured defeated knights, there were all types of people. Siegfried was very satisfied. As he had expected, the high-end slave market was essentially a talent market. "How is it, my lord? Are these goods to your liking?" Let's see more." "If..." Siegfried suddenly fell silent because he noticed a pair of crimson vertical pupils staring intently at him from a cell not far away. It was a girl as delicate as a porcelain doll, with snow-white hair like silk, and crimson eyes brighter than those luminous stones, like torches. Her neck and cheeks were covered with rock-colored scales, and two sharp dragon-like horns pierced through her bangs, pointing towards the sky. The white-haired girl just stared at Siegfried expressionlessly, staring and staring, until Siegfried's back began to tingle. What is this? A human-dragon hybrid? A half-dragon? He looked down, and the Wanderer's Handbook had already displayed the girl's information. Name, Fafnir. Female, 199 years old. Race, Ancient Dragon. An Ancient Dragon. Siegfried was so shocked, he nearly dropped his Wanderer's Manual. He meticulously examined the white-haired girl and the manual back and forth, suspecting the system had glitched again. Name, Fafnir. Female, 199 years old. Race, Ancient Dragon. Alignment, Neutral. Class, None. Daughter of Dragon King Albion, the youngest living ancient dragon. Other information unknown. Specialization, unknown. Combat skills, unknown. Talent, Dragon's Furnace Core, others unknown. Ability data. Strength, S. Agility, S. Magic power, S+. Intelligence, D. Luck, S. Leadership, E. Overall evaluation, S. Note, ancient dragons, perched atop the food chain. Legend has it that ancient dragons dwell on spiritual peaks, beyond the seas. Their lifespan is endless. They existed in this world long before humans and demons were born. This ancient species possesses power rivaling the gods. In fact, in the eyes of dragonkind, their ancient dragon ancestors are equivalent to deities. As far as Siegfried knew, these ancient dragons were all indolent creatures. Having lived for so long, they cared about nothing. They never concerned themselves with affairs on the continent, watching year after year as if spectating a play, observing order and chaos battling each other. How did this young ancient dragon end up here? In a slave market in this remote earldom? Damn, Hoover Trading Company is too impressive. First a death god, now an ancient dragon. How do they manage to attract all these mythical beings here? My lord, we discovered this half-dragon girl by chance in this area 3 months ago, said Hilton. This old fox Hilton, worthy of his reputation as a business tycoon, had noticed Siegfried's interest in the dragon girl, despite his efforts to conceal it. We initially didn't bother with her, but for some reason, she kept following behind our caravan. The manager in charge at the time was worried about leaving a girl alone in the wilderness, so he brought her back. It was obvious this was a lie. When that manager saw such a beautiful half-dragon girl, his eyes must have turned red with greed. He sent out all the mercenaries accompanying the caravan to capture her, and they were, of course, all killed. The manager was terrified and fled back to the city alone on horseback. However, when he arrived at the company, he found that the girl had been following him all along, flying. From that day on, the girl settled in at the company. She chose the cell with the best environment for herself, didn't talk to anyone around her, and spent her days eating and drinking excessively in the cell, fleecing the company for all it was worth. Hilton couldn't stand for this indignity. He immediately ordered a reduction in the girl's meals. As a result, that day 3 patrol guards disappeared, and their equipment appeared outside the girl's cell. The company tried to get rid of her several times, but each time they sent her away, she would reappear in her cell the next day, like a piece of chewing gum that couldn't be shaken off. Hilton was almost in tears. This girl's daily food expenses were more than those of all the company's employees combined. He prayed every day for some noble to come and take this ancestral goddess away. Now, a noble had come, and a great one at that. This girl is excellent, both beautiful and strong. Whether as a companion or a bodyguard, she would be a top choice, certainly an asset on your journey. The great merchant Hilton spoke eloquently, able to describe even a jinx as a lucky star, without mentioning a word about the food expenses. Siegfried couldn't be bothered with the old man and walked forward to meet the ancient dragon girl's gaze. The ancient dragon girl also stood up shakily from the ground and stumbled towards the iron fence, seemingly very uncomfortable in her human form. Shannon, this girl. Siegfried was about to ask the system if it would be dangerous to approach the girl. But then he saw the white-haired ancient dragon girl extend her small hand, as delicate as carved jade, grab 2 iron fence bars, and pull them outward with a sudden jerk. The entire cell door instantly deformed, creating a hole wide enough for 2 people. Siegfried was dumbfounded. The girl wobbled out, her way of walking very strange. She moved her arms and legs on the same side simultaneously, swaying back and forth. Rather than a dragon girl, she looked more like a penguin spirit. Under Siegfried's astonished gaze, she revealed an innocent and charming smile, two small canine teeth gleaming crystal clear and adorably cute. Siegfried mustered up the courage to try and pat the ancient dragon girl's head. Shannon hadn't given any warning, which meant there was no fatal danger. However, the next second, the words that came out of the girl's mouth left Siegfried completely frozen. "Papa." His outstretched hand stopped in midair. Siegfried looked around in confusion. There was no one else around, that old fox Hilton had already fled far away when the girl destroyed the cell door. Was she just calling me? What did she call me? Did I hear wrong? "Papa, pick up," came, finally. The girl hugged Siegfried's waist tightly. This little one had no idea how to control her strength and almost broke Siegfried's back. She seemed not yet proficient in human language, speaking haltingly with strange word order. Siegfried's mouth was open as wide as a box, partly from shock, and partly because the girl was almost squeezing his internal organs out. "Cough, cough, you, let go first, your impromptu old man, is about to be squeezed to death." The white-haired girl finally loosened her grip. She swayed her little fists, her face still wearing that innocent smile, obviously not reflecting on her actions at all. Siegfried noticed that this child's intelligence was also D. Oh no, she's as dim as Catalina. He turned around and called Hilton, who was hiding far away. Hilton walked over reluctantly, looking at the white-haired girl with some fear. "Lord Milan, as expected of you, subduing this girl so easily. I'll take this girl with me today." Hearing this, Hilton's old face bloomed with joy. "Certainly, my lord. I'll have someone bring her contract to you right away." Slaves in the kingdom usually had such a deed of sale. Whoever held this contract was the slave's master. However, given the white-haired girl's situation, this contract was purely for show. "Don't rush, I haven't finished speaking. I want to buy all the slaves here." On the way back to the inn, Bobo drove the carriage in silence. Tonight's events had been quite a shock to him. But what Siegfried experienced was 10 times more shocking. In the carriage, the white-haired girl sat on Siegfried's lap, wagging her thick, plump dragon tail, savoring the potato chips Siegfried had brought from Earth. It seemed that Hoover Trading Company had indeed kept her well-nourished. The child's tail was almost as thick as a bucket. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Opposite Siegfried, Yang Jing was staring at him with an indescribable, strange look. Yang Jing said nothing, but her eyes had already expressed her meaning. "I didn't. I never did anything. We're not even the same species, okay?" Siegfried was almost hysterical. What kind of situation was this? He had never even been in a relationship in his life. How could he possibly have a daughter, and an ancient dragon at that? Explaining is just covering up. "Alright, just shut up." Siegfried didn't want to argue with Yang Jing anymore. He looked at the porcelain doll-like ancient dragon girl on his lap, forced out a smile, and said, "Little sister, your name is Fafnir, right?" "Nana." "Nana, why do you call me Papa?" "Papa, you are, so, call you, Papa." No, I mean, why do you think I am your papa?" Siegfried's accent unconsciously started to mimic hers. Smell, Papa smell, you are, Papa. I smell like this child's father? Do you have something belonging to her father on you?" Yang Jing frowned slightly. Although she had been teasing Siegfried, she also knew this child couldn't possibly be Siegfried's daughter. Siegfried's eyes lit up. Yes, he did indeed have one possible item. A flash of white light, and a broken sword appeared in Siegfried's hand. It was the holy sword of the hero Barum. This hero, active 1,000 years ago, was a child raised by ancient dragons. "Sword is Papa's, found it." The white-haired girl Fafnir exclaimed excitedly. Her thick tail thumped hard against the carriage, shaking the entire vehicle. Indeed, she was the daughter of the hero Barum. Number 1 Golden Wheat Street, Count Constantine's manor. Count Constantine was 48 years old this year. Wearing a loose robe, with sunken eye sockets and a sickly purple complexion, his beer belly protruding prominently, he perfectly embodied the image of a nobleman who had overindulged in debauchery. Perhaps it was cliché, but most of these parasitic nobles who inherited their titles were just like this. At this moment, there were 3 people in the master bedroom of the Count's manor. On a bed large enough for 4 people lay an alluring young woman, covered only by a thin veil that barely concealed her bewitching curves. The woman curled up at the head of the bed, her jade-like feet trembling as they extended from beneath the veil. She watched the unfolding scene with terror in her eyes. Sean, the auction host, was kneeling tremblingly on the ground, facing the pale-faced Count Constantine. Just moments ago, Sean had burst into the Count's bedroom despite the guard's attempts to stop him, interrupting the 48-year-old Count's impending carnal pleasures. Count Constantine flew into a rage, immediately wanting to drag this ignorant fool out and have him chopped to pieces. However, he noticed that the usually well-dressed and courteous host now had disheveled hair, was drenched in sweat, and couldn't hide the panic in his eyes. Something had gone terribly wrong. Constantine immediately suppressed his anger and inquired about the situation. Then, he heard the most shocking news of his life. Sean grabbed his own hair violently, his voice almost breaking into tears. "My lord, I warned you before. That Hilton Hoover is nothing but bad luck. His slave trade is extremely risky. Nothing good could come from working with someone like him." "Enough, shut up." Constantine desperately tried to maintain his composure, but the terrifying facts made it impossible for him to stay calm. "I've been targeted by a Milan. How is this possible? How did he discover all of this?" He glanced at a cloth-covered mirror on the dressing table and made an immediate decision. "Both of you, get out. Don't breathe a word about this to anyone. Especially you, Wayna. If you dare speak of this, your husband is dead." "Yes. Yes. I understand." Wayna, the commoner woman, nodded repeatedly like a pestle. Count Constantine had long desired her and finally found an opportunity recently, coercing her compliance by threatening her husband's life. Unfortunately, before anything could begin, they were interrupted by Sean's dreadful news. Sean and Wayna left the room one after another. Constantine no longer concealed his inner panic. He scrambled to the dressing table and tore off the cloth covering the mirror. It was a strange-looking dressing mirror. At its top was a weeping skull, with a crescent scythe encircling the mirror frame and piercing through the skull's crown. He began to chant an odd prayer to the mirror. "Death is the equal destination for all living beings. We yearn for death, we fear not death, we live towards death." Then he tentatively whispered. "Your Eminence, are you there? I am your devout follower, Constantine. I have an urgent matter to report." For a long while, the mirror showed no change. Just as Constantine was about to stamp his foot in anxiety, ripples appeared on the mirror's surface, and a pitch-black, indistinct shadow emerged. Constantine's face lit up with joy. "Your Eminence, your humble lamb Constantine greets you." "Cut the nonsense, Constantine. You'd better have a real emergency to report." The bishop's voice on the other side was hoarse and cold. He was in a very bad mood. This fool Constantine had used a highly unsafe method to contact him. Scrying through magic mirrors didn't belong to any elemental magic and was considered black magic in the kingdom. It could easily be detected by the sun god's clergy. Usually, he would contact Constantine through a one-way channel, taking precautions to prevent magical fluctuations from leaking out. Constantine clearly lacked this awareness and ability. Count Constantine shuddered, his speech becoming somewhat stuttered. "Why, Your Eminence, there's a. Speak up. I don't have time to waste. It seems a Milan has arrived in my city." As soon as Constantine finished speaking, he heard a series of crashes and shattering sounds from the other side of the mirror. Then came a long silence. A deathly stillness filled Constantine's bedroom. After a while, a voice came from the other side. "Are you certain?" "Well, I'm not sure, I haven't seen him personally. But my subordinates saw a black-haired, black-eyed man at today's auction. He killed 2 guards in a very bizarre manner, and then. Then what?" Constantine swallowed hard. "He took away those 2 eye-salves." "What did you say?" "I'll send people to search for him right away." "Search your head. If he really is a Milan, do you think those idiots of yours can find anything? They'll only find death." Then what should we do?" "What should we do? You're asking me what to do? I'd like to ask how you've been handling things. How did you let a Milan catch on to us?" I don't know either. The auction invitations were distributed secretly, and every participant was recorded. Count Constantine was on the verge of tears, he felt truly wronged. This affair was originally planned to be foolproof. First, use the auction guests to conceal the whereabouts of the two elves, then use Hilton's hand to reclaim them, and finally quietly eliminate this group of slave traders to complete the recovery. It was supposed to be a ghost and God knows not escape from the Ice Elf King's tracking. Who could have anticipated that a Mylan would suddenly appear out of nowhere? This family usually operates in the Ophis Empire and rarely comes to places like the kingdom where magical creatures are scarce and weak. Who knows what possessed this Mylan to come here for an adventure? The black shadow on the other side of the mirror sighed, what else did that Mylan do? He said my days are numbered. Your Eminence, why aren't you saying anything? You must save me. Quiet. I'll withdraw all our followers from the city in the next couple of days. You're still a nobleman of the kingdom after all. Without evidence, even that Mylan can't do anything to you. Alright, is there anything else I need to do? If you don't want that Mylan to storm your manor directly, don't do anything, including your usual activities. Yes, I understand. I apologize for disturbing you so late at night. Before Constantine could finish his sentence, the mirror returned to its original state, reflecting his ghastly pale face. Damn it. Undead Bishop Robert smashed the mirror before him with a punch, helplessly roaring. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it. How did he discover it? How on earth did he find out? Robert clutched his head tightly, pulling at his pale gray hair. He could no longer contain his fear and anger. Days are numbered. That Mylan's words weren't meant for that fool Constantine, they were clearly a warning to himself. The appearance of a Mylan signified the complete failure of the plan, and he, a deeply hidden high bishop of the undead cult, could be exposed at any moment. This plan had been in the works for 3 years, a full 3 years. The entire undead cult had almost emptied its ranks, running east and west across the Chelan continent for this plan. Finally, after paying a huge price, they captured those 2 ice elves, and the plan had reached its final stage. But right at this moment, they encountered the most terrifying accident. A Mylan. It was precisely to prevent such an accident that the cult had chosen to set up the altar in this remote earldom of the kingdom. But what was the result? No, this isn't an accident. This monster, does he come sniffing around? This is simply cheating. How can such a creature exist in this world? Robert looked at the hair in his palm, and suddenly burst into laughter, a laugh filled with bitterness, helplessness, and madness. Ha 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 ha. So what? So what? The plan won't end. How could we possibly terminate it because of one person after all this preparation? Just wait, when that great one descends upon this place. Even if you are a hero, you won't be able to escape unscathed. The adventurers in the Stallion Banner. The young dragon girl Fafnir sat cross-legged in front of the elven twins, animatedly waving her small hands as she chattered away to them in Elvish. The twin girls, now facing a Fafnir who could speak their language, had dropped their guard and warmly welcomed this new companion into their group. The 3 girls, with a combined age of at least 3 centuries, began to laugh and play on the bed. So, who exactly is this child? Ever since Siegfried had brought Fafnir back, Kriemhild had been relentlessly asking this question. She's a relative's child. But she calls you dad, and she's half-dragon. And don't try to lie to me with a straight face. The little princess looked at Siegfried with an expression identical to Yang Jing's, albeit with an additional indescribable meaning. Siegfried gave up. He had originally planned to gloss over it again with his deceptive talk skill. However, this situation was too outrageous. If he could still get away with it, deceptive talk would truly be invincible. He sighed and said, Fine, it's not really something worth keeping secret. Her name is Fafnir, and she's not a half-dragon, but a genuine ancient dragon. What? Kriemhild was stunned. This adorable little girl was actually one of the world's most powerful creatures, an ancient dragon? But the books say ancient dragons have bodies large enough to blot out the sky. She looks more like a human? What's so strange about that? Even humans can master transformation magic, so it's not surprising that an ancient dragon can use it. However, judging by the little dragon girl's appearance, she clearly hadn't mastered it fully. How could she not even transform away that thick tail? On the bed, Fafnir wrapped her tail around the 3 of them, giggling and laughing. Goodness, that tail took up half the bed. So, why does she call you Dad? Well, the most crucial question still couldn't be glossed over. It's like this, I have some connection with that Dragon King, who is her mother. I'm sort of this child's stepfather. I'm not making this up, I have Albion's son come husband's holy sword, so I'm kind of half of Baram's successor. Even a distant connection is still a connection. Kriemhild was still skeptical, but there really wasn't a better explanation. Come to think of it, how could a 200-year-old ancient dragon possibly have a 20-year-old father? Roland stood to the side, tightly clutching the black hanging cloth in his hand. His mood was very heavy, so heavy that he didn't even have the energy to pay attention to the new companion. The pattern on this hanging cloth was enough to make a golden knight so serious. Seeing that Siegfried and the princess had finished talking, he finally spoke. Everyone, I have something I want to discuss with you, something very important. Although he said everyone, his gaze was fixed directly on Siegfried. Siegfried felt uneasy under the stare of this bearded big brother. Why is this guy staring at me like this? Has my impersonation of Mylan been exposed? What's the matter? Roland spread out the black hanging cloth in his hand on the ground, which was embroidered with a skull pierced by a crescent sickle. Siegfried's eyebrows immediately twitched, and he blurted out. The Death God's cult. Isn't this the symbol on that weird warehouse behind Hoover's Trading Company? Roland instinctively straightened his back and looked deeply at Siegfried, saying. So you do recognize this symbol? Then you must also understand the meaning it represents. Ah? Of course I understand. Star May, could you please explain this cult to everyone? Siegfried's face twitched, he actually didn't understand anything at all. He desperately made eye signals to the cool and aloof Yangjing standing nearby, pleading for support. But Yangjing ignored him, only returning a disdainful glance, then continued to browse her Wanderer's manual. Today she was reading about how to make a glamorous exit using the flash spell. Just as Siegfried was about to scratch his ears and cheeks in anxiety, Roland took the initiative to explain. This symbol is called the Undead Holy Emblem, it's the symbol of the Undead Cult, a branch of the Death God Church. In the past, there was only one Death God Church on the Qilin continent. Although they were called a cult, they weren't actually evil. They would help guide resentful souls to rest and use necromancy to convey the wishes of the deceased. Although their ultimate goal was to obtain corpses for research into necromancy, their methods could be considered righteous. However, one day the Death God Church split internally. One faction adhered to the original teachings, believing that death was just a part of life and that the rules of life shouldn't be forcibly changed. The other faction, however, became resentful towards the living, believing that death was the true state of life. This faction became the Undead Cult, and in recent years they've been causing tragedies across the continent, sacrificing lives to their god and turning the living into undead. Siegfried listened silently as Roland narrated. This model knight's expression was serious and solemn, looking as if he wanted nothing more than to pick up his great sword and slay all these cultists. But Siegfried had only one thought. What does this have to do with me? Why do you keep staring at me? However, since the other person was speaking so earnestly, Siegfried couldn't appear too casual. I understand. What are you trying to say? I once fought against them on the front lines of the human-demon war. These people are just a bunch of lunatics. Their appearance here certainly doesn't bode well, so. Siegfried heard this and immediately knew what this big fool wanted to do. He quickly raised his hand to stop him, his expression serious and resolute, saying. This matter, stay out of it. Is this a joke? Going to clash with the cult with just these few dozen people and spears? Aren't they tired of living? Shannon also said this matter had nothing to do with him, whether he intervened or not wouldn't affect the mission. Our Princess Coronation Company's business is to support our boss Kriemhild in ascending to the throne, not to risk our lives fighting cultists. Leave the upholding of justice to the real heroes. Roland stared blankly at the determined-looking Siegfried. The noisy adventurers in the tavern downstairs had long since left, and only the rustling of leaves could be heard from outside the window. The night in this city was so peaceful. But in Roland's heart, a storm was surging. Yes, when he saw this hanging cloth, he had already understood. Whether it was participating in the auction or cooperating with slave traders, it was all just a surface disguise. This Mylan's true target was the undead cult behind these people. A hero's sword points directly at evil. As long as evil could be eliminated, this Mylan would stop at nothing. What dedication! He even refused to accept his own assistance, planning to face the entire undead cult alone. Is it because he's concerned about Her Highness? Is it because he understands that if I die in the battle against the cult, it would severely impact Her Highness's future? Roland suddenly felt his face burning with shame, almost wanting to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. I previously saw you as someone who manipulated people's hearts for evil. I was so foolish, how could a hero possibly be evil? He stood at attention and bowed deeply to Siegfried, a full 90-degree bow. This wasn't a knight's salute. A knight's salute expresses loyalty and respect from the position of a knight. A bow, on the other hand, expresses respect and apology on a personal level. Roland had only performed such a deep bow to the Rose Queen in his life. Even his father-in-law and Kriemhild hadn't received such treatment. And today, he had found another person worthy of his reverence. Lord Mylan, I apologize for all my previous rudeness. You are indeed a descendant of the hero family. Your courage and loyalty make me feel ashamed. If your battle needs assistance, Knight Roland is willing to be your vanguard. All right, thank you then. Siegfried's eyes were about to pop out. Everything that had happened tonight left him shocked. Hiss, what on earth is going on today? The next morning, Siegfried was awakened by the boasting adventurers chattering downstairs. Adventurers worked in shifts, day and night. Some monsters only appeared at night, so hunters who targeted them had to adjust their schedules accordingly. As a result, the Stallion Banner was only quiet during the deepest hours of night. At all other times, it was filled with the drunken laughter and shouting of its patrons. That's why, although the tavern offered lodging, people rarely stayed here. Who could possibly sleep peacefully in such an environment? Siegfried sat up, holding his slightly throbbing head. He had gone to bed late last night, and being awakened so early meant he'd gotten less than 4 hours of sleep. And the quality of sleep wasn't great either. He lifted the blanket to find Fafnir hugging his waist, sound asleep. Her large tail was lying across his legs, making them go numb. Well, I guess some people can sleep in this environment after all. The girl had insisted on staying with him and refused to sleep in the next room. Siegfried had no choice but to share the bed with her for the night. This feeling was nostalgic. His sister Chi-Linger used to cling to him the same way. After a while, the others were gradually awakened by the noise as well. The group, with dark circles under their eyes, packed up their spoils and bid farewell to the enthusiastic innkeeper before heading back to the village. Before leaving, the innkeeper gave Yangjing a heartfelt embrace. She really had taken her as her own daughter. By the way, the young man whom Yangjing had rescued from the death cell had been secretly watching her from the kitchen. He had clearly been conquered by the beautiful and powerful Lady Star Mei. Unfortunately, when he had expressed his intention to pursue the lady warrior, the innkeeper had pulled his ear in front of everyone and scolded. Look at yourself in the mirror, you fool. How could a dimwit like you ever be worthy of my little Mei? The poor fellow was truly unfortunate. Though he had saved his life, he had lost his mother. By noon. They're back. I'll go report to Lady Catalina. My goodness, how much stuff did they bring back? What's so surprising? With Her Highness, Sir Roland, and even that hero going along, this kind of haul would be easy for them. Hiss, why are you so proud? What does it have to do with you? Eh? Where's the hero? The patrol soldiers were the first to spot the rapidly approaching carriage in the distance. They marveled at the cart full of spoils. Under Roland's constant whip, the 2 pack horses had galloped 30 kilometers carrying 5 people and a chest of spoils, finally reaching Wind Peach Village before afternoon. The poor horses collapsed as soon as they reached the stable. If it weren't for Kriemhild's occasional sun god prayers restoring their strength, the carriage would have broken down halfway. This wasn't Roland's fault. According to the plan, his schedule today was packed. Tomorrow would be the day of the trade with Hilton, and he needed to organize the troops and plan the tactics today to ensure everything would go smoothly. Catalina, that tiger girl, had actually been waiting at the village entrance since early morning. However, after waiting all morning without seeing anyone, she had gone back to eat when hunger got the better of her. She had always been someone who feared loneliness, and having been left out of this operation by Siegfried, she was now so excited to reunite with her best friend that she forgot all about the distinction between ruler and subject. The 2 girls found a random spot and started chattering about the details of the operation. The city is really lively, so much more interesting than the countryside. And let me tell you. Those beasts. Not only do they traffic humans, but they also desecrate the queen's relics. So then we. Ha ha ha, you guys are so bad. What happened next? Then we split up, and I don't know what Sir Siegfried went to do, but when he came back, he had an ancient dragon with him. What? An ancient dragon? Catalina listened with an ever-changing expression, increasingly regretting not having gone to the city with them, missing out on so many exciting adventures. In private, they had always been like this, without any barriers between ruler and subject, just like ordinary best friends. Back when they lived in the palace, they would even bathe together. The girls would often compare sizes in the bath, though everyone knew Catalina would win overwhelmingly every time. Eh? Where's Lord Milan? Catalina finally noticed that Siegfried and the legendary young dragon girl hadn't returned with the others. A small merchant caravan, escorted by mercenaries, was traveling on the main road toward Constantine City. They came from Duke Galloway's domain, planning to sell their local spices to the wealthy merchants of Golden Ear Street in Constantine. Suddenly, a mercenary dressed as a swordsman felt something and jerked his head up. He saw a winged figure hovering in the sky. He saw that the figure had a thick, round, scaly tail trailing behind it. He saw birds fleeing in flocks from the figure, those usually fearless sparrows desperately abandoning their airspace. The figure was scanning the caravan with a cold gaze, looking down upon the earth like a ruler of the sky. Everyone on guard. Enemy attack. All mercenaries immediately drew their weapons. Warriors raised their swords, shielding the merchants and goods behind them. Rangers decisively nocked their arrows and aimed at the figure in the sky, ready for a volley. Though they knew well that at this distance, neither arrows nor even magic could reach their target. What is that? A half-dragon? Are you kidding? Have you ever seen a half-dragon with such terrifying presence? Everyone in the caravan watched the sky tensely, as if facing a great enemy. The thing in the sky was so terrifying that they almost wanted to turn tail and run, though they didn't understand why they were reacting this way. The reason was actually quite simple. Because they were humans, the spirit of all things who had always stood at the top of the food chain, they rarely had the chance to experience being targeted by an apex predator. The being above them was the most powerful species on this continent. However, the figure seemed uninterested in them. After scanning the area, its wings beat powerfully, stirring up a violent gust of air. Get down! The merchant caravan below was thrown into chaos by the sudden gust. The figure cut through the air at an incredible speed, leaving a crimson arc of light as it disappeared into the horizon. Siegfried truly hadn't noticed the caravan. All his attention was focused on memorizing the surrounding terrain. Otherwise, he would have reminded Fafnir to flap her wings more gently. Fafnir was lying on Siegfried's back, her small hands wrapped around his chest. This was how he was flying through the sky. Because Fafnir's human form was so small, hidden behind Siegfried's broad back, it made him appear as if he had grown wings and a tail. She had a chocolate bar in her mouth, her payment for serving as a transport. Siegfried hadn't taken the carriage with Roland and the others, partly because he couldn't bear to add more burden to those poor pack horses, and partly because he wanted to personally survey the terrain and resource distribution of this earl's domain. After all, this place would soon become the company's base of operations.